Chapter 28, The Butterfly Effect. And it's Ireland 170, Bulgaria 160, Ludo Bagman announced. Victor Crumb catches the snitch, but Ireland wins the Quidditch World Cup. Harry and Ron went to the World Cup again, even knowing that there was going to be a Death Eater attack afterward, one where they would save their families if not other lives. Even knowing how the game was going to end, they still attended. It was a fun outing with their families after all, and for both of them, family meant everything, even after all these years. It was a little odd, Harry mused, how little actually changed between loops. Hermione had brought up a Muggle concept called the butterfly effect when they were researching the theory of time travel. The idea, roughly, is that a butterfly flapping its wings in Africa can lead to a devastating hurricane in North America months later. Of course, the hurricane isn't the butterfly's fault, but had its wings remained still or flapped a second later, the slight differences would have led to vastly different weather patterns. So too could the slightest changes in how the time travelers acted, in the words they spoke, alter the course of events in unforeseeable ways. And yet, the game he'd just watched was, down to the play, the same game as the one he'd watched 4 years ago in the previous loop. Quidditch games in Hogwarts likewise remained identical, only varying when Harry or one of his friends was playing, or not when he had in previous iterations. In social matters, Malfoy always came up with the same insults and attempts to bully them every loop, even, to an extent, when they were in Slytherin with him. The exams and homework assignments they were given did not change, not even a word. And Harry knew from asking around that it wasn't just teachers giving the exact same written tests every year. Such a thing would be ripe for cheating. The butterfly effect, it seemed, simply did not apply. Hermione wondered back then if all this was due to the nature of time, that it was self-correcting. Harry now wondered if the lack of butterfly effect changes was instead due to the action of his mother's protection. After all, it would not do for Harry to be blindsided by an unexpected alteration, one not directly precipitated by his actions. Even the prophecy delivered to Harry by Professor Trelawney remained almost the same, Harry mused. It will happen tonight. The Dark Lord lies alone and friendless, abandoned by his followers. His servant has been chained these 12 years. Tonight, before midnight, the servant shall break free and set forth to rejoin his master. The Dark Lord shall rise, greater and more terrible than ever before, and wreak terror upon his once defeater. Tonight, before midnight, the servant shall set forth to rejoin his master. The Dark Lord was coming back, some way, somehow. This was inevitable butterfly effect, or number with their attempt to ruin the Triwizard plot by replacing Tom Riddle Sr.'s bones work. Probably, hopefully. Had they stopped his only path to returning, they didn't know, but probably not. No matter what, Voldemort was coming for him. As always. Mobs, rushing through the campground in immense panic, trampling everything in sight. Terror, brought by men in dark cloaks and white masks, an echo of nightmares past, and a forewarning of nightmares yet to come. Fire, burning bright, all-consuming as it ravaged a peaceful celebration. The Death Eaters came, as they had come before. Ron ran and fought and protected his family. Harry ran and fought and guarded the backs of his godfather and honorary uncle. And the dark mark shined ominously in the sky, cast by some still unknown wizard, but blamed on a house elf. "Do you regret not doing more to stop this?" Harry asked. "Could we have?" Ron wondered. "Without tipping our hand, I mean. It's something to think about for next loop, but we were far more focused on the prison raid this time." Harry cocked his head and shrugged his shoulders. Fair enough. The time traveler's compartment on the Hogwarts Express was filled with nervousness and anticipation. Even though the Triwizard selection was still 2 months away, this was a critical year. For this was the year when the Dark Lord Voldemort would make a reappearance via a manipulated school competition, a hijacked portkey, and a necromantic ritual involving Harry's blood. But that was hardly the only thing that concerned them. "I've been thinking," Hermione began. "Shocker," Ron snogged, earning a half-hearted glare from her. "Well, I have," Hermione continued, "and we're going to have to rob Gringotts. Gringotts, of all places." Harry recalled the ominous poem posted outside their doors. "Welcome, stranger, but take heed of what awaits the sin of greed." He'd heard it from Hagrid his very first time in Diagon Alley, and he still held it to be true. You'd have to be mad to try to rob the goblins. Or, Harry supposed, be the Dark Lord Voldemort, who had managed to successfully get in and out of there in an attempt to get the Philosopher's Stone. "Do you think we can match Voldemort?" he wondered aloud, thinking not just of Gringotts, but of the battle that was rapidly approaching at the end of this year. "With our wands, maybe," Neville said, "but wandlessly." "We're getting pretty good at it," said Ron proudly, "and by the time we have to do the stealing, we'll be better." "But not good enough," Neville argued. Harry thought he was being a bit pessimistic, even if he had a point. There was a reason that even the best of the best wizards, Dumbledore, Voldemort, Grindelwald, even the Founders and Merlin and Morgana, still used wands in most situations. They just made things easier. Had they been able to ignore their trace and use their wands, any one of them could have easily completed the Azkaban mission alone. Wandlessly, though, it had required all 5 of them working together. Azkaban, as bad as the Dementors made it, was fairly lax in security. There was a very good reason Sirius had been able to slip out back in Loop 6, and it wasn't just because of his secret animal form. Gringotts, the bastion of the goblins and the storehouse of the wealth of wizarding Britain, would be a far tougher challenge. "Maybe," Luna offered, "we could ask Minister Fudge to advance his plans to bake all of the goblins into pies." "I doubt he'd listen to us," Harry said, placing a light kiss on her forehead as he indulged and enjoyed his girlfriend's flight of fancy. "Besides, who would eat that many pies?" Suddenly, the doors banged open, and the current occupants of the compartment exchanged glances and light groans. They'd forgotten to lock themselves in, and Draco Malfoy, their bane and annoyance in every timeline, couldn't help but come and bother them. "Hello, Malfoy," Harry said with a deep tiredness. "So, are you going to enter, Potter?" Malfoy taunted. "Or maybe you, Weasley, going to try to bring some glory to your name? Earn some money to move out of the shack you call a house?" Would they reveal they knew about the tournament? Could they reveal what they knew, given that they'd had no chance to hear about the upcoming event, which had been kept such a secret from the children except for Malfoy? Ron opened his mouth to rebut, but no sound came out. His shoulders slumping, he half-heartedly forced himself to ask, "Enter what?" This seemed to brighten Malfoy's day immeasurably, as he proceeded to drop tantalizing hints about the coming Triwizard Tournament, all without ever actually saying the words. Had they lacked foreknowledge, it would have been rather annoying. "I can't wait," Harry said, "for him to be turned into a ferret." Dumbledore's announcement at the opening feast not only served to create a lot of excitement across the 4 houses, but free up the time travelers' tongues to participate in that excitement. Even if they knew and couldn't yet share what the 5 tasks would be and who would be chosen as champion, they could still have fun listening to some of the more outlandish and accurate theories on what would be happening. In classes, they learned about 4th-year content again, along with the advanced material of the unforgivable curses from one Alastor Moody. The man, as before, was the height of paranoia, drinking only water he'd conjured himself or from his ever-present hip flask. The demonstration of the 3 darkest curses in existence was still horrible to watch, though less so than before, and Moody still was conscientious enough to keep Neville back afterward and apologize for the effect the presentation of the torture curse had on him. Neville even got a book out of the deal, a tome on magical cacti that had him engrossed for a week. The ferret incident, unfortunately, didn't play out the same way. Harry was a Hufflepuff now, and Hufflepuffs stand together. When Malfoy tried to curse him in the back, he shielded himself, wandlessly, actually, although he pretended otherwise, and the white-haired teen wizard got half a dozen hexes shot back at him before he could blink. Moody, who had been coming toward the scene, only laughed and cautioned Malfoy about his behavior, saying that walking to the hospital wing on his own under the effect of the numerous spells was punishment enough. Though he wished he had been able to see the bouncing ferret again, Harry was entirely fine with how that particular encounter had gone. September came and went and passed into October, and October's days ticked away toward Halloween. The Triwizard Mania, which had gone slightly into abeyance after the first week of school, returned in full force, and then once the announcement of the arrival of Beauxbatons and Durmstrang was posted. And while the rest of the school started betting pools on the champions, the time loopers prepared for the coming selection. "You have the spell, right?" Ron asked nervously. It was not the first time since the school year started that he'd asked this. "Yes," Hermione repeated. "I have the spell. I've read all the theory backward and forward. I've practiced the wand motions. I'm ready to cast it." The core protection charm was designed to let minors enter into magical bindings or other adult-only magical activities like learning to apparate without causing core damage. Hermione would be getting a lot of practice with the spell, seeing as it only lasted 24 hours. For Harry's safety, she would be enchanting him every morning and evening so that the protection never, ever ran out. On the afternoon of 30 October, just before the foreign delegations were due to arrive, Hermione pulled Harry into an abandoned classroom and drew her wand. "Are you ready?" he asked. "I am," Hermione assured him, before waving her wand in a complicated pattern of spirals and figure eights. "Tutum cor magici," she incanted, and a wholesome white light poured out of her wand and landed on Harry, seeping into him and surrounding his core. So long as this spell remained in place, no magical binding would cause him damage. "It's done," Harry said. Due to his wandless magic training, he had a deep understanding of his magical core that allowed him to be certain the spell had been cast correctly. The day of Halloween passed with incredible tension on the part of Harry, a tension that was only slightly ameliorated by 2 more castings of Tutum Cor Magici, once after breakfast and again just before dinner. Soon he would be entered into the Triwizard Tournament alongside his housemate Cedric. Soon he would be facing 5 immense magical challenges, though this time he'd actually get to use magic. Soon he would become the school pariah. Could they have done more to stop it? Yes, maybe. But they had learned in their time traveling through time that there were times for acting and also fornitacting. Harry could get through the tournament, they knew this. It would give them an excuse to devote all their time to intense training in preparation for Voldemort's impending return. And when Harry was captured, and Voldemort put in transfigured bone of the father and the ritual failed, it would possibly let them capture Voldemort, a huge goal, to be sure, but not necessarily unachievable. The prophecy said that he would rise again, eventually, but they could study the main fragment of his soul to determine if he'd made a 6th Horcrux yet at this point in time. On Halloween evening, they were ready. They enjoyed the wonderful feast before the lights dimmed, the goblet spat out gouts of magical fire, and Dumbledore stood up to read out its choices. The champion for Durmstrang will be Victor Crumb. One champion down, one that remained the same. Things were on track. The champion for Beauxbatons is Fleur de Lacquer. The French Partvilla girl stood up to join the international Quidditch superstar. 2 down. The Hogwarts champion is Cedric Diggory. Harry, Ron, Hermione, Neville, and Luna all applauded their housemate. Not only were they pleased for his selection, even if it was expected, but it would not do for them to be applauding right before Harry's name came out. "Excellent," Dumbledore called out happily. "Well, we now have our 3 champions. I am sure I can count upon all of you, including the remaining students from Beauxbatons and Durmstrang, to give your champions every ounce of support you can muster. By cheering your champion on, you will contribute in a very real way to their victory and to the victory of your school." The challenges these brave and skilled students have been chosen to undertake will not be easy, no, but I have every faith that all three of them will show the best their school has to offer. Now, I must join the champions in the antechamber. For the rest of you, I bid you good night, and I hope you all look forward to the coming year of Triwizard Tournament action as much as I do. Dumbledore walked out of the great hall. The goblet of fire had gone out. 3 champions had been chosen, as it was supposed to be, but not as it should have been. As the rest of the Badgers made their way to the Hufflepuff common room, cheering raucously and chatting with animation as they celebrated Cedric's selection, the time travelers could only follow along mutely. What in Merlin's name happened? Ron exclaimed furiously as November dawned. Why didn't Harry get chosen? I think I know, Hermione said. Remember, we switched out Voldemort's father's bones. The ritual he used to return last time, it just won't work. And I suppose, Neville said, sighing in realization of their mistaken reasoning, we all thought that he was so arrogant that he wouldn't bother to check. If he's found another way back to life, one that doesn't need Harry's blood, then he would have no reason to enter me into the tournament, Harry concluded. Well, at least Hermione doesn't have to keep protecting my core anymore. Small victories, Luna agreed. And it gives us a year of freedom, one that we weren't expecting. But Voldemort is coming back, one way or another, Ron pointed out. Trelawney's prophecy. If we believe it, Hermione interjected, keep in mind that it's Trelawney. Even if she's a fraud the rest of the time, that prophecy is a real one, Luna asserted. He's coming back. He's a master of dark magic, and he still has loyal servants who answer his call. The one who entered Harry last time, Neville said. Where do we think he is now? Not here, I'd say. No, Ron said. Why would he be? Sure, Voldemort seems obsessed with Harry, but not so much as to invest one of his few loyal followers into just spying on him. Then we're free, as Luna said, Harry concluded. Free to start planning our little heist. Free to start working in earnest on how to end the loop and deal with this. Harry tapped the signature scar that was burned into his forehead, the scar which contained a piece of his enemy's soul. Harry pulled out the resurrection stone, admiring once again its unassuming black form before preparing to spin it. Let's get to work. A week before the first task, Harry stayed up late at night. When everyone else in his dorm had gone to sleep, he took out his invisibility cloak and made his way stealthily to the forbidden forest. He knew from Ron's talk with Charlie after the first task last loop that the dragons were being held in pens somewhere in the massive and magical forest. It took 2 hours of searching and a lot of detection and tracking charms, but eventually he found where the pens were being constructed. A team of ministry wizards was working to construct them and cast some magical defenses to keep the fire-breathing reptiles contained. He had to wait 3 or 4 minutes for one of them to actually mention the word dragon, but once that had happened, he was set. The next day, he used a borrowed dictaquill to write out a short note. Cedric, there are dragons coming to Hogwarts. First task, probably. The other headmasters may cheat, but Dumbledore would never, so here's evening the odds a friend. Even if they weren't competing this time, Harry owed it to Cedric, the boy who had played fair only to be deemed a worthless spare, to do this, to give him a heads up. Because Harry didn't think that anyone short of Albus Dumbledore himself could go into a fight with a dragon entirely unprepared and survive, let alone win. Good luck, Cedric, Harry whispered as he charmed his note into a paper bird and sent it flying off to his housemate. You'll need it. Chapter 29, Spectator Sports. Harry breathed a sigh of relief as Cedric Diggory safely got past the Swedish short snout with a few light burns, scrapes, and bruises, following the same transfigured dog strategy that he had in the previous loop. Not a bad result at all for a teenage wizard going against a mother dragon defending her young. Victor Crumb and Fleur de Lacre also used the same strategies that they had before, though Crumb had to face Harry's Hungarian horntail instead of the absent Chinese fireball. Despite a far more challenging opponent, Crumb scored better, for the Horntail was wise enough not to trample its eggs, even under the effects of the conjunctivitis curse. In the end, the sports star from Durmstrang was in the lead, while Diggory took the middle spot, and the French girl was relegated to last place, frankly due to rather biased scoring on the part of several of the judges. Harry thought that her approach was by far the most magically advanced and interesting of the three. With the first task ended, the time for task number 1.5 arrived, the Yule Ball. Harry and Luna had it easiest out of all of the time loopers, seeing as they were in a long-lasting and committed relationship. It was made a bit more complicated by Luna's insistence on getting new dress robes. "We get to do this ball again and again," Luna exclaimed. "Why not take the chance to enjoy it in a different way, spice things up a little?" Harry acquiesced, and he and Luna ended up in whimsical but quite pretty and well-matched robes that looked more like Muggle-hot couture costumes than any wizarding fashion. They would, Harry thought, either earn the two of them admiration or mockery, or both. Ron and Hermione, seeing as their dating and breakup the previous year was publicly known, if not shouted out to the world, were both free agents on the ball date market. Ron, knowing from having lived through the Yule Ball before that it was not a good choice to delay in securing a partner, snagged their housemate Susan Bones just 2 days after the Yule Ball had been announced. Hermione, meanwhile, ended up taking the same date that she had last time, Victor Crumb. "I thought that you two had decided not to date last loop," Harry pointed out. "And do you really want to deal with the Skeeter rumors again?" "We did, but he was a lovely partner for the evening, kind and courteous and very good-looking." Hermione let out a small, girlish giggle. "Besides, better me to handle those rumors than some other poor girl who doesn't know what she's getting into." As for Neville, well, he showed his Gryffindor roots by approaching and asking out his long-time crush, Hannah Abbott. It turned out that the Hufflepuff girl had wanted Neville to ask her out for quite a while, but had been too shy to bring it up. Harry was happy for his friend, and almost twin, even if he was sad that the relationship Neville and Hannah would build now would be undone soon enough. "It is what it is," Neville said when Harry brought that up. "I can't put my life on pause, none of us can, and I have faith that we'll find the last Horcrux and the way to end the loop soon, that I'll be able to have a real relationship with her soon, that I'll be able to be honest with her soon." Harry could only smile at his friend's optimism, and those smiles continued through the month of December as he refreshed his dancing, both standard and non-standard, with his girlfriend. When the night of the Yule Ball came, Hermione looked radiant on the arm of Victor Crumb, but it was Harry and Luna who claimed the lion's share of the attention that night. Harry didn't care one bit, though, only that he was having fun, and that Luna was having fun, and that Ron and Hermione were having fun, and not being jealous of each other, and that Neville and Hannah were looking very adorable together as they swayed in the corner of the dance floor. Harry didn't worry too much more about Cedric as the new year came and went. He knew that the Hufflepuff boy had figured out the golden egg clue by the Yule Ball in the previous loop, and he also knew that despite the words of the riddle, not a single person would be endangered by the second task. Rita Skeeter, on the other hand, was rapidly returning to the top of his enemies list, with her attacks on Hermione for ensnaring Victor Crumb with love potions, and Hagrid for his status as a half-giant, calling him vicious when he was the kindest and gentlest man Harry knew, and Luna for corrupting the boy who lived with her insanity. And the worst part is that despite being a tabloid reporter, people believed her. He perfected wandless silencing magic within 2 days of the Howler barrage beginning. "I had a theory," Hermione recalled, "one that I was going to test on the night of the 5th task last time. But, well, I never got around to. I'd almost forgotten it after all these years. But the Howlers and the undiluted Bubituba pus jogged me memory." Hermione had managed to recall that particular dangerous letter in time to avoid having her hands in bandages, but she was still very, very angry and had spent a day in the library looking up wizarding law on postal crimes. a category of laws which was not very well fleshed out. What was the theory? Well, Hermione reasoned, we know that she managed to keep getting inside the school, even when Dumbledore had managed to ban her in both loops. Only one other person has managed that. She's able to spy on very private conversations. And well, I made an off-handed joke about us being bugged, like the Muggle term from spy movies. Neville was the one to connect the dots first. You think she's an animagus, he guessed. An insect animagus or some other small form. Precisely, Hermione said, with a vindictive grin. And I have no doubt that she wouldn't want to miss her favorite punching bag being rescued from the Black Lake at the end of the month. The second task was the worst of them when it came to the spectator appeal, who wanted to sit around in the middle of January watching the placid surface of an ice-cold lake. Nobody, that's who, and once the students started growing restless, Harry took the opportunity to sneak away and don his invisibility cloak. Pulling out a prepared glass jar that had been charmed to be unbreakable, Harry was ready to hunt and catch a reporter. Sure enough, while Hermione and Victor were having a heartfelt conversation about the state of their relationship, or lack thereof, he spotted a water beetle with glasses-like markings around its eyes, fluttering in excitement. Reaching out with his wandless magic for extra deniability, he froze the beetle's motions and yanked it into his hand, depositing it into the unbreakable jar, which he quickly closed. A surreptitious animagus detection charm lent credence to Hermione's theory, and the dearth of Rita Skeeter articles over the next week proved it. They had captured Rita Skeeter, illegal, unregistered beetle animagus. What should we do with her? Harry asked as February began. I mean, we can't keep her forever, can we? We could, Hermione offered. Would anyone really miss her? Not to mention, Ron pointed out, if we let her go, she'll just tell on us for kidnapping her, which won't go over well. I'd rather not have my best friend go to prison, even if we could just reset things. Does it even matter? Luna asked. We're fairly sure this loop isn't our last anyway, so just keep her captive for now and figure out a more permanent solution for next time. It was a bit cold-hearted of Luna to suggest such a thing, but honestly, Harry approved. A few months' captivity for the libelous reporter in a timeline she wouldn't remember was maybe not perfect justice, but it wasn't unjustified cruelty either. With Skeeter trapped, the third and fourth tasks went as smoothly as could be. Through a combination of guile and an incredible display of magical prowess, Fleur de Lacre had woven protections around her box that neither of the other champions could hope to breach, and she'd broken into both Crumb and Diggory's boxes. This had won her full points in the third task. The school's excitement for the fourth task was immense as they looked forward to seeing Victor Crumb tackle an aerial challenge. Harry was a bit disappointed he wouldn't have an excuse to bond with Stormswift this time around, and of all of the tasks, the fourth was the one where he'd had the most fun. Even though Crumb ended up winning, Harry had boatloads of fun cheering for Cedric. 4 down and 1 to go, Cedric exclaimed as he stood on a table in the Hufflepuff common room. The scores were fairly even, with Victor having a slight lead over Cedric and Fleur in a close third. I'm so proud of all I've accomplished so far, and so thankful for all of the support I've gotten from my fellow Hufflepuffs. We've shown the world that Hufflepuffs are strong, that Hufflepuffs are united, that Hufflepuffs are victorious. The Badgers cheered for their champion. Now let's get this party started. The Hufflepuff celebration lasted deep into the night, with Professor Sprout, their head of house, joining in rather than try to get them to go to bed. Even the time travelers, house agnostic as they were, couldn't help but feel a full measure of Hufflepuff pride the next morning. Now, unlike them, the Triwizard Cup was doing exactly what it was meant to do, promoting unity of the school and friendly competition among the 3 schools. No fourth champion, no bullying and hatred, no sinister plots. But the shadow of the Dark Lord remained. On the night of the reveal of the 5th task, Harry staked out the area where Victor Crumb had pulled him aside to talk. hoping to find Bartemius Crouch and get information from him about the bad thing he'd done, information that they hadn't been able to get before the loyal death, either in Hogwarts, had murdered the senior ministry official. Unfortunately, Crouch never showed, likely because of the major shifts in the timeline and in Voldemort's plots and plans, since they'd chosen to destroy and replace Tom Riddle Sr.'s bones. Another unexpected timeline change, Harry thought angrily, and this time we missed out on a chance to get some new information. It was with a mood of pessimism that Harry entered the month of June, a mood that wasn't helped by the slow progress of their work on finding a way to free him of his Horcrux and end the loop. First, his mother had had to teach them everything she knew on the obscure subject of blood rites, sacrificial magic, time magic, and rituals, a process that had taken most of the school year. Only in the beginning of June did they start working on the specific ritual that had created Harry's temporal protections and deconstructing it to figure out how to tap into it and make it change to do what they wanted. It was a slow process, one made slower by the fact that they, i.e., Hermione, had to memorize everything, since any written-down notes would be destroyed in the event of a time loop reset. On the night of the fifth task, Harry watched things anxiously, despite his near certainty that the Triwizard Cup would not a trap leading to Little Hangleton Graveyard. Not a single set of red sparks was seen from the maze for the entire time, yet another sure sign that Victor Crumb going rogue and using the unforgivables on the other champions had not been his own choice, but due to the nefarious intervention of Voldemort's agent in the school. Suddenly, a sharp pain went through Harry's scar, and his vision went white as foreign images began to flood through his mind. At last, the sibilant voice of Voldemort crowed from the Dark Lord's mouth, and from Arismuth it seemed at times, I am reborn. 7 by 7 by 7 days of mighty power. Let all rejoice and fear. When he returned to himself, Luna and Ron were on either side of him, clutching at him protectively, and nervously while Neville and Hermione tried to ward off curious and worried onlookers. Harry's vision was filled with red as his own blood flowed copiously from his lightning scar and into his eyes. I had a vision, he whispered to his friends. Some way, somehow, he's back. Cedric's triumphant return with the cup, his crowning as the greatest student of magic in Europe, was overshadowed by the panicking of numerous adults over Harry's collapse. Dumbledore had rushed over to see what was wrong, and upon Harry informing him of the barest details of what he'd seen, had immediately started sending out patronus messages to organize a response to Voldemort. Shortly after his vision, Igor Karkaroff had turned fearful and vanished, with Severus Snape doing so more calmly and gracefully half a minute later, though with no less haste. Cedric got his moment in the sun, of course, the applause of the crowd, the speeches of congratulations from Minister Fudge and a barely there Albus Dumbledore, and of course, the bag of 1,000 galleons. But everyone could tell that his victory was the least important event of the night. Beyond being debriefed on his brief vision, Harry was not involved in any further planning concerning Voldemort. Nor did he expect to be, really. After all, as far as the headmaster knew, he hadn't been involved at all in the Philosopher's Stone debacle, nor in stopping the Chamber of Secrets and what laid within, nor in collecting and destroying numerous Horcruxes. He was a Hufflepuff of above-average magical power, nothing more, nothing less. 2 days after Cedric Diggory's victory in the tournament, the students of Hogwarts were packed onto the express to be sent back down to London. Harry and his friends sat in a small compartment playing chess and exploding snap, and doing anything to take their minds off what they could do nothing to affect. This is the second time, Harry had pointed out, that we've lived to see Voldemort regain his own form. Don't remind me, Ron had replied with a shudder at the remembrance of his own death at the Burrow. Just remember, Hermione had said, the farther we get, the more we know, and the better chance we have of figuring out the sixth Horcrux. But none of that was on their mind now as Ron, ever the expert on chess, was playing 4 simultaneous games against his 4 friends and winning them all, though Hermione's and Luna's were the ones that were most even. Ron had just put Neville's king into a back-rank checkmate when the Hogwarts Express began screeching to a halt. "We're not in London yet," Neville said rapidly as they braced against the rapid deceleration. "Not even close." A glance out the windows confirmed Neville's words. They were deep in a forested area, one with no human habitation in sight. The scenery was passing them by, but slowly as the train's speed got lower and lower. As it came to a halt on the tracks, the train jerked back, undoing the silencing on their compartment with a wave of his hand. Harry heard panic-filled conversations spreading through the halls as the prefects and head students tried in vain to restore order amid the madness. Nobody knew why this was happening, nor had anyone heard from the driver, according to one snippet of conversation picked up from a Ravenclaw prefect. Little did they all know that they were going to be getting answers soon, and wished desperately that they hadn't. "Students of Hogwarts," a fear-inducing voice boomed, a voice that the time travelers had heard before. From the back of Quirrell's head, from the reborn Dark Lord at the Burrow in Harry's vision. And now the voice of Lord Voldemort was heard by every child of wizarding Britain, and none, at least until time reset, would ever forget it. "The Hogwarts Express is now under the control of the great and glorious Lord Voldemort and his Death Eaters. Through your death and pain and suffering shall the people of Britain learn fear. With your lives on the line shall they learn obedience. And with Harry Potter dead at my hand, and Dumbledore failing to save you, shall they learn that none can stand against the Dark Lord Voldemort." The time travelers exchanged glances. They needed to act, that was for certain, for their character would not allow otherwise. But how? "Let Harry Potter come out," Voldemort declared. "Let the boy who lived, the one whom Med could defeat me, come and face me, unless he is too much of a coward to do so. He is a mere Hufflepuff, after all, or so I have heard. If he does not, though, I shall destroy one carriage of the express." Harry's path was set at that moment, and all of his friends understood. With a nod to all of them and a kiss for his girlfriend, he stood up and drew his wand. Pushing open the window of their compartment, he grasped onto the upper ledge, and with a combination of his own strength and a push of his wandless magic, swung himself upward to land on the roof of the train. Tapping his wand to his throat, he amplified his voice so that everyone, student and Death Eater, could hear it. "I'm here, Voldemort," he called out. "If you want to duel me, then let's do it." Chapter 30, The Sixth Horcrux. While Harry was drawing attention with his pronouncement and challenge, the remaining 4 time travelers had quickly come up with a plan. First, Ron shot off a patronus message to Amelia Bones, head of the DMLE, while Hermione did one to Dumbledore. With that done, the plan they came up with was simple. Neville and Hermione would defend the train, Neville taking their side of the tracks, while Hermione would cross the corridor to defend the other side, while Ron and Luna would try to help get the students organized. As soon as Neville cast a disillusionment charm on himself and conjured himself a sword for his offhand, he followed Harry out the window, though he did not aim for the top of the train. Instead, he landed in a crouch on the forest floor outside the express, stretching out his magic as he stood up to pinpoint the locations of the Death Eaters. Using the trees as cover against detection or spellfire, he began to run in unpredictable paths, shooting out curses which flew straight and true, aided by a bit of Neville's wandless magic, into Death Eater targets who were, at first, caught unaware. He wasn't sending out unforgivables, no, but he wasn't sending out stunning spells either. He would put the Death Eaters down in a way that they couldn't just be woken up by their comrades. After eliminating about 5 targets, he sensed that the Death Eaters were starting to shield, meaning that he had to be more creative with his attacks, conjuring ice water over their heads or transfiguring bears to attack them or other strategies to get past their shielding. He used wandless magic to stop Therhomnum Reveliachums from finding him, but he knew that he was on the defensive now. Hefting his sword, he decided that it was time to get up close and personal. On the other side of the train, Hermione was having similar problems, though she begun her attack with a slightly different strategy, transfiguring almost 100 large predators and sending them to seek out and attack Death Eaters as her opening attack. Such a feat was only possible for her due to her incredibly large core, one of the greatest benefits of their time looping. She followed that up with a stream of powerful curses targeting the Death Eaters who were dealing with the beasts with the greatest ease. Numbers she could handle, one against many, could benefit a clever one, but she'd rather not face down the most powerful inner circle Death Eaters head-to-head. Inside the train, Ron shot off a series of bangs from his wand, which immediately shut everyone up, even the prefects. "We need to keep ourselves safe until Dumbledore or the Auras get here," he declared. Though he was only a fourth year, the fact that he was remaining calm in the face of Voldemort himself was enough for even the seventh-year prefects to follow his lead. "We should gather everyone in a few compartments and put every capable wand we have into reinforcing them. We almost certainly beat whoever's out there in numbers, and I have faith that the boy who lived can hold off you-know-who long enough." Ron had never once before used his friendship with the boy who lived to get anything, not until now, when his best friend was up above him fighting off Voldemort himself, and he needed to get the students of Hogwarts into some semblance of order. Meanwhile, Luna was sneaking around under an invisibility spell, tagging every junior Death Eater she could with a stunning spell, and shoving them into a compartment she charmed to be unnoticeable. She didn't have the absurd cores and extensive spell base of her friends, but she was a quick learner and a quicker thinker, and she'd do her part to stop a potential fifth column from tearing them apart from within. She pressed herself to the side of the corridor as prefects, following Ronald's advice, began having the younger students file toward the two central compartments. Her job would be over soon enough. Lord Voldemort did not tarry or delay to meet Harry's challenge. "So," he said, "you're the one whom everyone says beat me. A mere babe then, and now a child. Brave, to be sure, but foolish, foolish to think of challenging me. You will fall to my wand and beg for death, boy, and I, being a merciful lord, will grant it." Those words sparked a memory in Harry, a memory of a vision from a time long gone, of a man who hated Harry but cared for his mother and who had spat in the face of Voldemort rather than kneel. It brought him not hope, but determination. Determination to win at all costs, to last as long as he could. His friends were down there. Luna was down there. Cedric was down there too, and he had lived this time, and Harry wouldn't see him die. "Crucio," Voldemort lazily incanted, and Harry easily dodged the red bolt of pain. "You'll have to better than that. And how did you even manage to return in the first place? Arsi Confractus." "A bone breaker," Voldemort commented as he batted the spell away with ease. "How dark of you, my boy. Would Dumbledore approve?" "Against you?" Harry asked. "He'd approve anything short of an unforgivable, and you never answered my question. If you wish to know before you die, for 343 days, 7 by 7 by 7, a week of weeks, did I bathe the rudimentary form I had managed to inhabit in the blood of innocent children, a brother and a sister, every day." Harry looked on in horror as Voldemort continued his gleeful description of the Dark Restoration ritual. Was this what their interference with the bones had brought? Almost 700 dead children. Each day, I grew stronger until at last I achieved this, a restoration to a power that would make my past self seem a shadow. And I, Lord Voldemort, shall. "Flagellus incendius," Harry snarled out, interrupting the man's grandstanding. "A flame whip," Voldemort said as he countered the advanced spell with a shield of water. "How interesting." Beneath him, Harry could feel his friends' magic as they began to make their moves against the Death Eaters, and he knew that the time of lazy banter was over. He needed Voldemort distracted. He let off a chain of a bright, blinding gloom followed by two curses and a fairly dangerous hex, and then he had to use a Protego Maximato to defend himself against Voldemort's return salvo. The battle was joined in earnest. Luna had stunned 15 students, all of the ones whom her friends had identified in their time as Slytherins as probable Death Eater sympathizers. She was just coming back out of the compartment where she was hiding those students when she heard a hissing sound far too close to her and a heavy slithering. Peeking around a corner, she saw a massive, green, scaly snake, one that dwarfed her in size. It was far larger than any normal snake she'd ever seen, and she was fairly sure she recognized it, Voldemort's familiar Nagini. And as it came into view, she was assaulted by a horrible but very familiar sensation, a sensation that made her almost shout in glee. She'd found it, the sixth Horcrux. Unfortunately, just as she'd noticed the snake, it noticed her in return and immediately lunged. She hastily put up a shield, one which held for a moment as Luna hastily backed up toward the compartment door, toward where Ron and the prefects were wrangling students. She let out a scream in the hopes that somebody would come to help her. She tried blasting it with magic, with curses and hexes and stunners, but they all bounced off as it menacingly advanced on her. The thing, or maybe just the Horcrux inside it, seemed to feed on her fear. The only thing keeping her upright was the conviction that she needed to pass on her information to one of her friends before she died. After all, her unique way of perceiving the time loop meant that specific information like Nagini's Horcrux status might not be passed on to the next loop. She passed through the compartment door and tried to transfigure it into a wall, but in her nervousness, it didn't work particularly well, as Nagini halfway took it down in a single battering strike. But even a second of delay was a second she could run, and run she did, as fast as her short legs could carry her. She made it the length of another compartment before she felt the Horcrux snake racing at her, and she desperately dove to the side, but was thrown into a corner. She felt an arm bone break beneath her as she collided with the hard surface, and afterward, a painful burning that started in her leg and spread through her with every pump of her heart. She'd been bitten. Cedric Diggory was thankful that somebody had bothered to take charge, even if it was a fourth year. He was the Triwizard champion of Hogwarts, the winner of the fifth task among others, and yet he was paralyzed upon hearing the voice of wizarding Britain's nightmare. But Ron Weasley had spurred him and his fellow prefects into action, and his plan was working quite well. Suddenly, he heard a high, feminine, terrified scream emanating from about a compartment away. Seeing that his fellow prefects had things under control, he rushed to the aid of whoever had made that sound. Never for a moment did he consider that it might have been a Death Eater trick or trap to lure out some student into the open, and his naivete was thankfully not his downfall. He came across Luna Lovegood, one of his other younger housemates, but one who was fiercely protected by her 4 older friends. Speaking of those friends, one of them was currently dueling he who must not be named on top of the Hogwarts Express. One had taken charge inside the train, and 2 more were missing from his cursory head counts. Cedric had a strong suspicion that she hadn't just been lost in the shuffle, but that she had been doing something to help out. That she had gotten hurt was immediately obvious to him, for she was laying awkwardly in a corner with the largest serpent he'd ever laid eyes on bearing down on her. "Spell, resistant," she croaked out, halting Cedric's wand in the middle of a stunning spell as he decided to try a version of his first task strategy, transfiguring a piece of rubble into a bulldog and sending it to attack the snake. It didn't look like it was going to last long, so he transfigured another one as he ran toward Lovegood and began casting what few medical spells he knew on her. Her injured arm seemed simple enough, but the bite on her leg looked bad. "Venom, bite," she croaked out, shaking her head at his attempts to help. She was a fellow Hufflepuff, and Cedric would do everything in his power to help. Cedric transfigured 2 more bulldogs as a delaying tactic as he made to levitate Luna and retreat with her. Instead of helping out, she whipped out her uninjured arm and grasped at his collar, using it to pull herself up to his ear. "Tell one of my friends," she whispered so softly that even he could barely make out the words. Before they die, the snake Nagini is 6. The snake Nagini is 6, Cedric said softly back in confusion. What does that mean? They'll know, Luna groaned out, dropping her, which rolled onto the floor. Now go. The last word was said so loudly that Cedric jumped back in shock. He didn't think the girl capable of it. His surprise only grew when she lifted her uninjured arm and began to send spells and hexes spitting out of her palm. Wandless magic from a 3rd year. Go, she shouted. Yauavito, tell them, or it's all for nothing, please. Though Cedric didn't understand it, not at all, the girl's conviction was obvious, as was the fact that she was trying to buy time for him to deliver her message. Items began to levitate and pelt the snake, pushing it ever so slightly backward, but it was clear that Lovegood was growing rapidly weary. He paused for a moment, about to help, but Lovegood shot him yet another pleading look. And so, with self-loathing in his heart for leaving a fellow badger to die, he ran. He had a message to deliver. Harry heard a scream of terror in the distance, one which sounded a whole lot like his girlfriend, but he didn't let that distract him. After all, death was not the end, not for anybody, as he knew from the resurrection stone, and certainly not for him and his friends. He just hoped that if it was Luna in danger, that she would be spared most of the pain. Instead, he redoubled his attack, creating a mongoose out of water to counter Voldemort's snake of fire, a fitting symbolic counterattack, and he'd learned in his studies of ritual magic just how important symbolism could be. He could see confusion in his enemy's eyes, confusion and fear. Even if Voldemort was still outclassing Harry in this fight now that they'd both gotten serious, Harry had proven himself a formidable opponent for a wizard of any age, let alone his meager years. Harry rolled backward and to the side, almost falling off the train, to avoid a powerful Ventus Horribilis, the dark wind charm that blasted out a dark magic-infused gale. He caught himself on the edge of the train's roof, and exerting all of the upper body strength he'd gained from 4 years of physical training, pulled himself back up to face a Voldemort who was peering over the side of the train to see where he'd fallen. In closer quarters than most spell duels, Harry instead created a dagger with wandless magic and plunged it into the Dark Lord's abdomen, a strike which Voldemort partially evaded, but that still caused a heavy cut to his side. Harry took advantage of the open wound to cast a blood-to-acid transfiguration, one which Voldemort cancelled after a few seconds, but not before it had caused him some damage. You are proving to be quite a nuisance, boy, he snarled as Harry went on the defensive, dodging or shielding a barrage of dark curses, many of which Harry didn't recognize. He eyed all of them curiously and examined them with his magic, even as he protected himself from them. After all, Harry knew something that Voldemort didn't. He was only secondarily fighting to win. While surviving this fight would be nice, he knew that the more important thing was learning as much of Voldemort's fighting style and dark magic repertoire as he could before he got sent back in time. I do try, Harry replied cheekily, as he raised the metal roof of the train to act as a physical shield, giving him some breathing room to prepare a major spell, a magical chains construct that combined runes, transfiguration, and charms, and thus was difficult to counter even by an experienced spellcaster. While the spell, an invention of Hermione's, was certainly potent, it had several disadvantages in combat. It required far more time, magical power, and focus to cast than a dozen lesser spells. It was not something that Harry could use in a duel more than once, so he had to make it count. As the metal was blasted apart, Harry let the spell go, and the magic flooded out of his wand, unraveling and expanding as it cascaded over Voldemort and began to bind him. He flared his magic wandlessly while furiously countering the chains. This helped him a little, but not enough. Harry had to wait until the chains were fully formed to cast any further spells at it, lest he end up disrupting his own magic, another weakness of the spell. But as soon as he could, he began sending every hex and curse he knew flying at the Dark Lord, who still managed to evade or shield most of them despite devoting most of his energy to dealing with the chains. 10 seconds after the spell had been completed, the chains shattered with an intense burst of magical light. But Voldemort was the one on the defensive now, as he worked overtime to block Harry's own magic and undo the few hexes that he'd had to let land on him while in chains. Harry couldn't help but smile as he pressed the attack. Luna was tiring, and quickly at that. Wandless magic wasn't easy, and her core was pitiful compared to her friends, that of a mere 14-year-old girl, though Harry in particular would argue that there was nothing mere about her. A jolt of pain came from her upper abdomen as the venom in her blood inched closer and closer to heart, breaking her concentration and causing the items she was levitating and controlling with her telekinesis to falter and then fall to the floor. She was done, this much she knew as Nagini reared up to attack her again. She just hoped her message would reach one of her friends in time. Nagini dove for her throat, and Luna closed her eyes in the face of the inevitable. And she breathed her last breath. Cedric took less than 20 seconds to dash across one more compartment to reach where the students were still congregating, huddling in fear as the older students poured all of their magic into reinforcing the outer walls of the train car. "Weasley," he shouted, determined to fulfill his housemate's dying request. A red-headed pair of twins and a younger, red-haired girl both turned to him, but neither were the person he was trying to reach. "Ron Weasley," he clarified. Looking around, he saw a flash of distinctive Weasley ginger hair another full car over. It looked like he was busy wrangling some students in the other occupied car. The fourth-year boy couldn't hear him. "Weasley," he shouted, and deciding to hedge his bets, he added in Granger, "Longbottom." He wouldn't call for Potter and disturb in the middle of fighting you-know-who. He just wouldn't. "Weasley, Granger, Longbottom," he called as he shoved his way through the thickly packed crowds. "I have a message from Lovegood." About halfway down the car, he heard a female voice, the voice of Hermione Granger, coming from one of the compartments. Ducking into that compartment, which was full of second-year Ravenclaws, he saw out the window the girl's bushy brown hair whipping around as she fought defensively against 5 Death Eaters. She had her back to a wall, literally, but she was holding her own. "What's the message?" she called backward, not taking her eyes off of the fight, running forward and spinning in a circle as curses and shields shot out of her wand. Her dueling was far more impressive than anything he could do, and he was the winner of the Triwizard Tournament. "Lovegood says the snake Nagini is 6, whatever that means." He refrained from mentioning Lovegood's death, lest that distract her. Whatever it meant, Granger seemed pleased to hear it, breaking into a wide smile. But alas, the distraction of that smile caused her wand to pause for a split second, and that split second was all that one Death Eater she was fighting to spit a dark purple curse straight into her center, one that she couldn't shield. Hermione Granger gasped as she fell to her knees. Cedric gasped in despair as the Death Eaters crowed in triumph. He wanted to leap out of the window to come help her, to save her when he couldn't save Lovegood, but before he could, Granger collapsed onto the ground. And the world shattered. And there was oblivion. Chapter 31, Hoping for an End. "Have you seen?" Hermione began, as they returned to their 11-year-old selves on the Hogwarts Express once again. All 4 of them, having come from the middle of a battle, instinctively scrambled for their wands before their bodies caught up to their conscious minds and relaxed. Hermione broke into a wide grin as she and Neville took their customary seats in the compartment. "We have it," she exclaimed. "Or Luna had it, the final Horcrux." "What is it?" Harry demanded, and what had happened to her? "The snake Nagini is 6, or so said the message she sent via Cedric," Hermione reported. "I honestly don't know what happened to her, other than that she couldn't tell us herself." Harry frowned. Why wouldn't she have been able to deliver her message? What had happened to her? There was only one way that he had any chance of finding out. "Darby," he called out, and the excitable house elf popped in. "Yes, Harry Potter, sir," he said. "Can you pop me on and off of a moving train?" he asked. "If you is ordering it, Master Harry," Darby answered. "Then," he ordered, as he used a bit of wandless magic to render himself invisible just in case, "pop me to Luna, if she's alone." Darby took his hand, and the wizard and elf disappeared from the express and reappeared in a decently sized bedroom that was painted pink and orange. In the bedroom, a 10-year-old blonde girl was laying in her child-sized bed. She turned her head upon hearing the pop, looking straight into Harry's unseen eyes, and smiled. "Hello, Harry Potter," she greeted, typically for her. "Hello, Luna Lovegood," he said, relieved. Even though he knew intellectually that Luna would be here and alive and unharmed, he needed to see it with his own eyes. "Are you okay?" "I died," she said simply, neutrally, even as Harry gaped in horror. "Before the reset. It was quite painful, I think. I don't remember it, though. I just know that it happened. Just as I know, Harry, that you are my dearest friend and truest love, even if I have to make new memories with you every time that time turns back." "Then," Harry said, as he tried to recover his composure and sanity from hearing his girlfriend nonchalantly talk about her own death, and no, Shasn't allowed to die. She's not part of the loop in the same way as his other friends. He should have protected her better. He should have. "If you hadn't gone up, we might have all been killed," Luna said, "and I wouldn't have found out the truth of the last soul piece." "That doesn't make it okay, Luna," Harry said forcefully, almost shouting. "And are your deaths okay, Harry Potter?" Harry closed his eyes in resignation as he realized she had a point. Even with the loop. "No, they aren't," he admitted. Death wasn't fun, even if he had flat out invited it once. And would him having died to save Luna made thing any easier for her than her death was now for him? "I'm here now, Harry Potter, and I'm fine. And I want to make new, real memories with you." "Then let's make them," he said with a smile as he tried to take his mind off of her death, a death that, he reminded himself, had been undone. She was alive, right in front of him, and she would never die again, not until they were old and grey and had enjoyed a perfect life together. But what could they do together, he thought, to make those new memories? Harry had to make his appearance at Hogwarts, spend time with his other friends, deal with Quirrell and Pettigrew and everything else that came around in their first year. And then he had the perfect idea. He snapped his fingers and summoned a pebble from the garden outside Luna's window into his hand, cleaning it of dirt and placing it before her. "How would you like to start learning wandless magic, Luna?" "I would love to," she said with bright eyes. A Ravenclaw first, and at heart, she was always eager to learn something new. "Well, the first and most important thing is self-confidence, self-belief. And you know that you achieved this before, Luna, don't you? Even if you can't explicitly remember." "I do," Luna said. "Well, the first step, according to my mum, involved levitating this little thing with a wand. You can't do that yet, but I still have faith. You can lift this with your mind, and one day, sooner than later, I'd suspect, you will. Will you come check on my progress?" "Every day, my moon," Harry promised. Luna gathered him in another childlike embrace, her thin arms wrapping around him with a 10-year-old's enthusiasm, and he reciprocated, gently stroking his hands through her blonde hair. Their relationship now was far deeper than it had been the last time they were 11 and 10. It was a romance that had lasted through 2 resets, through 4 additional years of closeness and 2 additional years of active dating. And so, while he had left Luna mostly to her own devices in previous loops during his first year, he would ask Darby to help him visit the rookery far more often this time around. His love, even if he wasn't capable of feeling it in the same way now as when he had a teenage body, deserved nothing less. Not to mention, it would ensure that she would become even more capable of defending herself than she had been before. With the added distraction of reteaching Luna wandless magic, the first term of Harry's, hopefully final, first year at Hogwarts flew by. The quartet had made the decision, having gone into all 4 houses now, that they would do this loop in the same house they'd spent their earliest years at Hogwarts, Gryffindor. This had several additional benefits for Harry, particularly being able to claim his early spot as Seeker, though he'd forgotten just how fanatical one Oliver Wood could be. And while Sirius had supported him no matter his house, there was something to be said about the ex-Garn prankster's excitement at his pup going into Gryffindor like him and his dad. Without the Resurrection Stone and access to his mother's shade, the group's progress on the project to end the loop and fix Harry's scar was limited to painstakingly copying down from memory all of their progress from the previous iteration. Even this onerous task they finished by the end of October, just in time to fight a renegade mountain troll, leaving them a quandary. "I know we try to keep our heads down in our first year since Voldemort is in the building," Hermione said. "But hear me out. We made that decision back when we were still new at this. Still not even OWL qualified, let alone the post-Newt masters we are now. We don't have to watch every step in fear of him, not anymore." "So you want to, what?" Ron asked. "Go take care of the basilisk early." "No, we can leave the basilisk alone until next year, and the diadem too. But every month counts on our research, and we're missing a key component." "You want to grab the resurrection stone," Neville realized. "But how do we get to the stone?" Harry asked. "Unless we have basilisk venom to destroy the Horcrux attached to its ring." Hermione looked at Harry for a moment before groaning. "Didn't think of that," she muttered. "Damn it." "You know what?" Neville said. "Let's just kill the basilisk now. Sneaking Hedwig into Myrtle's loo isn't the most inconspicuous thing in the world," Ron pointed out, "and we don't want to let too much slip to Voldemort, even if we aren't living in fear of him." "Do we even need her for the battle?" Harry asked. "As strong as we are now?" Hermione shrugged her shoulders. "I'm not sure. I'd like to think we can do it without her." "Well, let's wait until after Christmas at least," Harry offered. "It will give us some time to train up our bodies, and we can use my cloak to sneak in. It's better than any spell." "Sounds like a plan," Ron agreed, and Neville and Hermione both nodded their agreement as well. "And after that, we'll go with Darby to grab the stone on its ring," Neville said, earning yet another chorus of approval. "Well then," Harry said with a wry grin as the time travelers' meeting dispersed, "I'll have to go tell Hedwig she won't get to be Battle Owl this loop." Hedwig was moderately disappointed, but appeased by a copious offering of bacon. Luna was also displeased, but appeased by a promise from Harry that they were going to come up with an airtight plan and keep each other safe. The plan they came up with was in fact about as airtight as a plan to fight a basilisk could be. Neville would go first, using wandless magic to get a good idea of the basilisk's shape before identifying its head area and using his wand to conjure thousands of spiked balls and shoot them into the snake's eyes. After that, Hermione would conjure a flock of birds, though not roosters. While technically they would be mere animated magical constructs and not actually living, they would still fall prey to the basilisk's gaze and thus serve as a test to see if Neville had succeeded. If any of them fell dead, Hermione would know. Finally, Harry would step up and very carefully act as bait to lure the basilisk into opening its mouth, whereupon said mouth would be jammed open with a conjured metal bar and pelted with everyone's strongest attack spells. Throughout all of this, Ron would be maintaining his strongest shield charms to defend the rest of them from the basilisk. For a bit less than 2 months, the time travelers trained their spellwork as they obsessively practiced and perfected the moves they would be required to execute individually and in well-timed combinations. Neville would often be found wandering the most dangerous greenhouses and animal paddocks alone, and with his eyes closed, relying on only his magical senses to keep himself aware of the dangerous plants and creatures surrounding him. Hermione would be seen by her friends creating and controlling almost 100 sparrows at once. Harry would kill one of the constructs and make Hermione accurately identify which one he had attacked and when with eyes closed. Ron would hold up shield spells while his friends pelted him with every curse they knew along with a barrage of projectiles. And Harry spent days and days conjuring huge objects quickly while running as if for his life. Christmas came and passed. Harry spent a holiday at Hermione's and received his cloak, while Ron enjoyed a festive season with his brothers and Neville spent time with his grandmother. And when they returned to school, Harry had an invisibility cloak and a group of courageous friends ready to use it. Things happened, somewhat surprisingly, without any problems. Neville destroyed the basilisk's eyes with brutal efficiency. Hermione confirmed his success with equal speed, and Harry went in for a quick kill, jamming the basilisk's mouth open the second it tried to swallow him. All the while, Ron deflected the few strikes the basilisk managed to attempt. The four friends smiled in grim satisfaction at the corpse. "What does it say about us?" Hermione mused. "That we can come up with a plan to kill an ancient basilisk in less than a minute between the four of us, Anduin." None of them particularly had an answer. Instead, after giving themselves 2 weeks of recovery time just to make sure they were in full form, and to keep an eye on Quirrell for any unusual behavior in response to their snake-killing foray, they had Darby pop them out of school and to Little Hangleton to get their real prize, the second Hallow. Notably, they did not even come close to Tom Riddle Sr.'s grave. They would let the Triwizard Tournament play out as it did in their ninth loop, for at least then they knew what would be coming and fewer people would be at risk. Only Harry, really, and he was quite capable of handling it. Or so they hoped. Darby, as before, was the one to carefully retrieve the ring box. Harry would face the Horcrux and its temptations, while Neville would wandlessly levitate a basilisk fang into the ring from a distance, and Ron and Hermione would prepare to restrain Harry if it seemed like he had succumbed. Even well prepared, even having felt them and been snapped out of them before, the Horcrux's insidious whispers penetrated deep into his mind, telling him that just putting on the ring would give him everything he wanted, everything he needed, a chance to survive and have a life beyond the loop. He tried to restrain himself. He did, but of its own accord, his arm moved toward the cursed piece of jewelry. But Harry slowed himself down enough for Neville to be faster and drop a venomous snake tooth straight onto the ring that contained a bit of their enemy's soul. A horrible scream sounded through the environs of the gaunt shack and all of Little Hangleton, and it heralded a glorious thing. One of the 7 anchors tying Voldemort to life had been broken. Horcrux hunting and the resumption of their long-term research with Lily Potter didn't mean that the remaining events of first year didn't play out. They all participated in the dragon's smuggling this time, knowing the castle well enough after more than a decade to easily evade Professor McGonagall and Draco's attempts to catch them. And they all took the trip through the trapdoor in the Forbidden Corridor, a bit later than usual, in March this time instead of January or February, and secured the Philosopher's Stone to be kept safe under Ron's mattress until Voldemort was again disembodied, and the stone could be returned to Nicola's Flamel. Pulling on almost forgotten memories of his visions of Voldemort's successful return using the stone, combined with research in the library and advice from his mother, Harry managed to succeed in using the stone to transmute a decent amount of gold for each of them, including Luna. It wasn't enough to make them Malfoy rich or anything like that, but it represented hope, hope that they would soon secure a future beyond the loop, a future in which having a bit of a nest egg to start them out in life would be useful. And the best part of the year, at least in Harry's biased opinion, was when Luna succeeded shortly after her 11th birthday in levitating her pebble with wandless magic, achieving that first step before she ever touched a wand. Harry watched with a wide, proud smile as his girlfriend shakily lifted a pebble up, holding it for a few seconds before it dropped back down onto the table with a clatter. It was a start, but from there, Harry would be able to guide her through the remaining stages with ease. You can feel how your magic is reaching out and acting on the pebble, can't you? Luna nodded, but it's so slippery, so hard to get it to grasp consistently. You'll get it soon enough, Harry assured her. Every day you get a bit better. Once she got her magic use consistent, Harry was able to give her all the tips and tricks to manipulating her magic freely. Even if she didn't yet have much magic available, Harry was determined to see his girlfriend as capable without her wand as she was with a stick in her hands. Not to mention, the constant practice of using wandless magic in her everyday life would certainly help her magical core start to grow. As the summer before their second year passed, Ron made sure to secure the diary, and on their first night of that year, they grabbed the diadem. Harry celebrated Luna's sorting into Gryffindor by letting her stab both of the Horcruxes with a basilisk fang, obliterating them even as priceless history was destroyed. Luna pointed out that it was Voldemort who had destroyed it. They were just righting a wrong. 3 of the 7 were now destroyed. Hermione got her anti-Lockhart report published even faster than last time, although it still took months for her evidence to convince his loyal fans and supporters to turn against him and realize the immensity of his crimes. Still, they all put on vindictive smiles as the man who had, in an erased future, tried to memory wipe them got taken away in chains. At Christmas, Harry ensured that he got to have a good conversation with Creature, securing the locket. Swearing the elf to secrecy on the details, he brought out a basilisk fang and let the house elf fulfill his favorite master's final and most important order. "It is being done," Creature said as 4 of 7 fell. "Creature is thanking Master Harry." "It was my pleasure," Harry replied graciously. When he returned to Hogwarts, he reported success. "So," Harry said, "we're halfway there. The ring is destroyed, and the diary and the diadem and the locket." "But those were the easy ones," Neville pointed out. "The rest of them are going to be harder, stealing the cup, figuring out your scar, and then taking out Nagini and the main piece." "But we can do it," Ron asserted. "I have no doubt. Everything we've done, everything we're capable of doing, the end of all this is in sight." Hermione waved her wand, conjuring a large piece of parchment and causing a single number to appear on it, 895. 895 days, she said, until the 5th task. They had hope, and that would get them to the end. Chapter 32, Grand Theft Horcrux. An abandoned classroom, heavily charmed to be unnoticeable except to 5 particular second and third-year Gryffindors, featured an otherwise unused wall that had been transfigured into a blackboard. The blackboard, whose highly incriminating contents had been temporarily erased over the summer by copying them to a piece of parchment, was now filled again with 3 columns of writing and drawings, all of which were on a single subject: how to rob Gringotts. The leftmost column, primarily filled with Harry's messy scrawl, was entitled The Direct Attack, and consisted of a plan that would have Voldemort himself agape at the sheer audacity of some of its proposals. It was, as the title implied, entirely devoid of subtlety save for the concealing clothes that would be used to disguise them. Their identities would be protected mostly by the fact that not a single person would suspect 4 third-year students to vanish out of Hogwarts to rob a bank with powerful wandless magic. The direct attack column included a lot of calculations about things like how many goblins Neville could fight off at once, and the probability of one of them dying a glorious death by dragon fire, and thus was the least favored of the 3 ideas. And that was ignoring the problems a direct attack on the goblins would cause societally. Harry still had a lot of fun with it, though. The right column had the heading of retrieval by proxy, and it was almost as simple as the direct attack idea. The one person, Hermione had reasoned, who was guaranteed to be able to get into and out of Bellatrix Lestrange's Gringotts vault was none other than Bellatrix Lestrange. They had proven capable of getting into and out of Azkaban before, and with a large group. Breaking out Lestrange would be harder, but doable seeing as they had a lot more experience and fluency with wandless magic now than they'd had during their break-in the previous loop. If they could convince her, through magical compulsion or non-magical trickery or both, that she should retrieve the cup from her vault, she would be able to do so easily, for the goblins cared not for wizarding laws and wizarding crimes, save for the various treaties which bound them, as Sirius had proven when he'd managed to buy Harry a firebolt during his time as a fugitive Azkaban escapee. The downsides to the Lestrange plan were manifold, however, and not just the obvious downside that they would be freeing the most sociopathic witch in Britain certainly, if not Europe or the whole world. Despite his exoneration, suspicion would fall on Harry's godfather in the event of such an escape, as Bellatrix Lestrange was born Bellatrix Black, his first cousin, and although there was no love lost between the two of them, many in society still viewed the Black name as synonymous with dark magic and would suspect Sirius of playing a role in helping his cousin get her freedom. And so, while they had fleshed out this concept like the others, it was unlikely to be their final stratagem to retrieve the last inanimate Horcrux. The center column was central for a reason, as it contained the plan which the time travelers were most likely to be following. Entitled The Heist, it was far more complicated than the other plans, and it was only half completed yet. The basic outline was based on the 5 layers of security they knew protected Gringotts' most high-security vaults. This had been determined through a combination of book research, letters from Ron to his brother Bill, and a trip to the Black Vaults that Harry had wheedled Sirius into taking him on the past summer. The outermost and most porous layer of security were the bank's doors, guarded by vicious-looking but mostly ceremonial guards who were nevertheless trained to spot obviously suspicious behavior. Unfortunately for Gringotts' security, and fortunately for the plotters, they were severely restricted in what they could do by the numerous treaties with the Ministry. Gringotts waste Goblin territory, but to take action without clear cause could kickstart another goblin rebellion, and nobody, wizard or goblin, wanted that. The second layer of security were the teller desks, at which a wizard or witch would have to present their key to a goblin teller, who would verify it physically and magically against Gringotts' records. This step involved goblin magic that remained secret to even the wizards they trusted most, and so it would be the hardest one for them to bypass. The third and fourth layers of security were both used only for the high-security vaults, a category to which the Lestrange vault unfortunately belonged. The third layer was an enchantment known as Thief's Downfall, which took the form of a waterfall which washed away any form of concealing magic that it touched. The keyword being touched, of course, at least in theory. If the waterfall was just for show and not an integral part of the protection, they would have to proceed with the far less likely to succeed Plan B. The fourth layer, of course, were the dragons and other XXXXX-class beasts that the goblins had trained to guard their vaults. Not the greatest challenge they had ever faced, given that Harry had survived a dragon encounter once before without even wandless magic, but not something to take lightly either. And finally, to round things off, was the protection that Griffook had bragged to him about during his very first visit to Gringotts, the one that had taken place before the time loop had even begun. Anybody who touched the vault door without authorization would be forcibly transported inside the vault, where they would stay until a goblin came by in a few years for a security check. This wasn't a problem, actually. All they needed to do was to get into the vault because they had a reasonably good plan for getting out. A sixth layer of security, a nasty combination of the Geminone flagranta curses that Bellatrix Lestrange had told them under Veritaserum that she'd put on her treasures, could be bypassed by a counter curse that she'd also been forced to tell them about, so they weren't particularly worried. The plan, as much as they could plan, was complete. Now it was time to put it into action. Neville and Luna stood beneath Harry's invisibility cloak, an heirloom which made Luna get an odd, contemplative look on her face every time she looked at it, on the steps outside Gringotts Bank. Both being still children in size, the pair were easily able to fit under the cloak without leaving any parts of themselves uncovered, which would have been an obvious sign of their presence. They also had the self-discipline to stay almost entirely still and 100% silent for hours on end, amusing themselves largely by people watching and by conversing through a silent legilimency link between their minds. Of course, they weren't the only two people hiding beneath the cloak, just the only two who were of a normal size. As part of planning, the group of time travelers had developed a variant of the shrinking charm. Human transfiguration was always fraught with peril, which was why they had learned it last among all of the magical skills taught at Hogwarts, but they had enough experience and confidence to make it work. Harry, Ron, Hermione, and Darby, the strike team that had been selected to enter Gringotts, were all shrunken down to less than an inch in height, with proportionally decreased mass as well. They likewise remained silent, though they had freedom to run around a little within the lodge, from their perspective space beneath the hem of the cloak. The selection of the strike team had been divisive, to say the least. Their primary concern for the Gringotts raid was not death, to be honest, but being captured by the goblins and subject to fates ranging from a lifetime of slave labor to being fed alive to a guard dragon. They didn't know how much of the stories that were told about the goblins' punitive methods were truth or just that, stories, but they weren't willing to take the risk. As a result, one of the four young magical whose lives were tied to the loop would have to stay outside of the bank with Luna to reset the loop by force in the event that the theft failed. Harry had been immediately excluded from being chosen for that role, as watching her boyfriend commit suicide would not be a pleasant experience for Luna, even if she wouldn't be able to remember it in full detail. Likewise, Hermione, who had experienced the two most painful and traumatizing deaths out of all of them, would not be asked to take on the onus of deliberately ending the loop. Instead, she'd be going to face potential death by dragon fire, but such a death, Hermione pointed out, was likely to be quick and not nearly as emotionally scarring. So it had come down to Ron and Neville, who would stay and who would go, who would take the risk and who would be the backup, who might face a death in combat and who a death by their own hand. It was Luna who had made the final decision. It should be Ron who goes, she had said, and Neville who stays. After all, the first time you went through a series of traps and protections for a valuable artifact, it was Harry, Ron, and Hermione. Harry had thought back to the very first loop. Before, by the mechanics of the time travel, he had been pushed into making friends with the best person he'd ever gotten to know. Even if he knew intellectually that Neville was the late addition to their little clique, he rarely thought about it nowadays, for the year Neville had spent as an outsider was dwarfed by the almost 2 decades now he'd spent as a full member of the group and an undeniably close friend. None of them could come up with a particularly good reason not to do as Luna had suggested, instead letting her idea of creating a little situational symmetry stand. Magic often worked on things like that, after all. Neville and Luna and the miniature trio had been popped into Diagon Alley under the cloak by an already shrunken Darby, as had been done for the past several days. They had spent weeks studying images of every witch and wizard who was part of an old money family. Now they watched and waited for one of those familiar faces to make an appearance in the alley on their way into Gringotts Bank. Neville tapped Luna on her shoulder and pointed out a graying wizard walking down the cobbled path of Diagon Alley. Despite his stooped appearance, his walk was undeniably haughty, and his clothes were of the finest make that only the pureblood elite could afford. His face was one that both Neville and Luna recognized, the face of the Death Eater Not. With a nod from Luna confirming his identification, Neville grasped at his 4 miniature friends and levitated them out from under the cloak. The 4 quickly made themselves invisible with a flex of wandless magic, ensuring that nobody would notice a group of tiny people flying into the Elder Knot's pocket. The 4 secured themselves, magically and with their own physical strength, at the lip of Knot's pocket, allowing them to watch carefully as Knot strode imperiously past the goblin guards and toward the nearest available teller. Presenting his vault key, He was immediately assigned a cart goblin to take him down to his vault. The miniaturized people held on for dear life as the cart sped downward, deep into the goblin caverns. When Harry saw the waterfall of thieves' downfall approaching, he signaled for all of his friends to drop into the pocket and cover themselves with wandless shields. This combination ensured that the enchanted water did not even come close to touching them, and with that, 3 layers of security were easily passed through. Through a combination of treacherous climbing and levitating each other, the 4 thieves made their way back up to the opening of Nart's pocket by the time that the cart slowed to a screeching halt. Waiting just for the moment that everyone present was distracted by the opening of Nart's vault. And wow, did the old Death Eater have a lot of gold in there. The thieves carefully lowered each other to the floor and scurried into a corner to hide. It would not do to be detected. When Nart finally left with his bag full of more gold than the Weasley family would see in a year, the thieves finally spoke for the first time in hours. "All clear," Ron said, as they ran far away enough from the wall to be entirely in open space, a feat that which would have 2 steps for their larger bodies, but required a good 30 seconds in miniature. Harry pointed his hands at Hermione and willed the magic keeping her shrunken to end. While they weren't comfortable performing human transfiguration without wands, reversing it wandlessly was easier. Harry did it for Hermione, the best of them at transfiguration, and then Hermione did it for Harry, Ron, and Darby. After all of them took a few moments to enjoy finally being back in their proper sizes again, Harry transformed into his hawk animagus form. The bird of prey's keen senses would serve as an early warning system for them, and even better, nobody would expect a hawk to be able to use magic. Adapting their magic use to work in animal form was an innovation that Harry had come up with only after, had realized how much easier Azkaban would have been with the hawk form protecting him from the Dementors like Padfoot had protected Sirius. Animagus wandless magic, in the end, had taken him and his friends about 2 months to learn fully. Thankfully for them, the Gringotts vaults were fairly well organized, numerically speaking, and they knew that the Lestrange vault was Vault 53, while Nott was Vault 46, fairly nearby. The goblins didn't rely on a confusing layout to hinder thieves. After all, the goblins themselves needed to be able to navigate. It took them a few minutes to orient themselves, and another 15 or so to carefully make their way toward the Lestrange vault. Upon spotting their next big challenge, Harry circled back toward his friends and smoothly transitioned from flying back to standing. "Dragon upcoming," he informed them. "How are we going to play this?" "Hermione has the counter curse for inside the vault," Ron reasoned, "and Darby is our ticket out of here, so they make a run for the vault while Harry and I play distraction. Harry as a hawk, me as a human." All of them nodded at the plan, and so they got ready for the trickiest fight they had faced since their first attempts to challenge the basilisk. Harry in his hawk form took the lead, swooping around near the head of the half-blind guard dragon. The dragon was clearly surprised not only by the appearance of a bird so deep underground, a kind of creature it had likely not encountered in its decades of captivity. Harry spared a moment to pity the chained guard animal. Luna would want to free it, he mused. But flying a dragon out of Gringotts was not exactly the inconspicuous exit they were hoping to achieve. The dragon was undoubtedly doubly surprised when the hawk started spitting lightning and spells out of its wingtips, and when said hawk was joined by a red-furred little mammal doing the same with its hands. With such odd creatures assailing it, it hardly noticed 2 figures dashing at high speeds across the cavern floor in front of it before touching the door of the vault it was meant to guard and getting sucked in. Instead, it just breathed a stream of fire at the annoying bird attacking it. Harry's left wing nearly got scorched by a gout of fire, nearly, because he managed to wrap his magic around him in a shield that absorbed the worst of the draconic flame. When he spotted that Hermione and Darby were in, he cawed twice in close succession, a signal to Ron that it was time to go. With Ron manipulating the stone around them to temporarily muzzle the dragon, The pair of them made their own dash for the vault door, Harry returning to hands and feet instead of wings and talons just as he touched the door. The sensation of being sucked through a metal door was not pleasant. It was not meant to be, Harry supposed, but after an interminable feeling of his atoms being squeezed through a dense magical alloy, he arrived whole on the other side. Hermione was laying on the ground, looking unhurt though slightly worse for the wear, and the coins and jewels she was touching were neither burning her nor replicating. The counter curse was tricky, she reported, but I got it done. Meanwhile, Ron was wading through gold, searching for a badger-adorned cup. Could really use Luna's senses right about now, Ron grumbled, as his friends joined him in the search. For about half an hour, they dug through piles of gold coins, and it was eventually Harry who spotted it, a simple cup with badger designs that seemed to draw his attention unnaturally. After so many experiences with Horcruxes, Harry was beginning to develop a bit of resistance to their darkly magical attraction. He wasted no time, drawing a basilisk fang out of his pocket and sending it flying like an arrow toward the cup with a simple application of wandless magic. He was glad to hear the cup let loose the characteristic scream of a dying Horcrux. "5 down," he cheered, causing his friends to turn from their searches to let out whoops of joy. "Now everyone join hands," Ron said, grasping Harry with his left hand and Hermione with his right, with both of his friends holding the hand of Darby. "Darby," Harry said in a commanding voice, "I order you to take all 4 of us to the Chamber of Secrets." And Darby screwed his face in concentration and popped them all away. For a house elf's master's word is law, especially for an elf like Darby, whose master of choice rarely gave him orders at all. The world dissolved around them, and 3 triumphant wizards and a tired house elf appeared next to a basilisk corpse. "Oh," Harry muttered, blurring his words, "and remember to grab Neville and Luna at some point." Chapter 33. An Archmage in the Tournament. It was in May of Harry's 3rd year at Hogwarts that they did it. 5 living children and a dead adult met in an abandoned classroom near Gryffindor Tower with a few dozen pages of notes in front of them. The notes represented the culmination of years of work over 2 generations and multiple timelines. They were, in short, the salvation of Harry, of all of the time loopers, and of the whole wizarding world. "We have," Harry said, though everyone present had been involved deeply in the research project, "the solution now. A way to end the time loop and destroy my Scar Horcrux at the same time. The only question now is, do we use it now?" Ron asked what they were all thinking. "Or do we use it later?" "The problem is that there's so much we don't know," Hermione groused. "We don't know whether Nagini was made into the 6th Horcrux before Voldemort's fall or after. We don't know when in the time period between Trelawney making her prophecy during exams and Harry having his dream a month or so later that Voldemort actually gets his body. We don't know what would happen to Voldemort if he's still a wraith when we destroy his last Horcrux. Not even Mrs. Potter, who studied esoteric magic more than us, can predict that with any certainty. In short, we're flying blind here." "I vote to wait," Neville opined. "I mean, think about it, sure, doing it no might make things better. If Nagini isn't already a Horcrux, and if Wraith Voldemort would just fade away on removing Harry's Scar Horcrux, and if whoever the loyal servant we still don't know about is decides to cause havoc in a way we can't predict, and then we can't retry anymore." "I must agree with Neville," Harry's mum said. "There are too many unknowns, and the Triwizard Tournament is a dangerous thing. I don't want to see you get hurt, Harry." "I handled it fine when I could barely use magic," Harry protested. "Now I'll be able to use my wand and me wandless." "And you were doing everything in your and your friend's power to mitigate the risks because of that," his mum argued. "Are you telling me you wouldn't be bolder this time around, try to show off?" Harry and Ron exchanged glances with each other and the rest of them. They had been spending their spare time coming up with over-the-top ways to defeat the tasks they knew were coming in grandiose shows of magical strength and skill. "Wait it is, then," Harry said, "unless somebody has an objection." "Bertha Jorkins," said Ron somberly, "and the Muggle gardener you saw killed in your dream vision. If we wait, we're letting those two die without even trying to save them." He wasn't wrong. If things worked out, undoing the Scar Horcrux now would save two innocent victims of Voldemort's cold cruelty. But if things didn't work out, if something new went wrong in this pass through the tournament, dozens, hundreds of lives could be endangered with no chance to turn back the clock and save them. "The needs of the many," Hermione whispered, "outweighs the needs of the few, or of the one, or the two." Harry recognized the line from a movie he had watched with Hermione a long time ago, and it was clearly a quote that had stuck with his friend. "But," his girlfriend said, "it's far easier to let the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few when you're not one of the few." Luna was right. What right did they have to play guard with the lives of Bertha Jorkins and the gardener whose name they hadn't bothered to learn? Years and years of time looping, of playing with making slight changes and watching the ripples, of risking their lives and dying and returning to life with few consequences, had given them a nonchalance when it came to lives. Their own lives, yes, but also the lives of others. "We have until exams to think about it," Harry said. "Action or inaction. To condemn two whom we just might be able to save, or to risk a future spiraling out of our control that just might lead to the deaths of many." In the end, it was Lily Potter who made the final decision. "In my expert opinion," she stated a week or so later, "I cannot be confident that Voldemort would simply vanish even if Harry is the last Horcrux. There's also a good chance that he would be set back by the destruction of his last Horcrux, altering his behavior in ways we can't predict. Besides, how do we know that Voldemort isn't in some body at the moment, either a construct he made for himself after losing out on the Philosopher's Stone, or inhabiting some animal, like he talked about doing in his graveyard speech?" Lily's words were enough to convince them, and given that her shade would have a role to play in the ritual to undo the time loop and scar Horcrux, if she wanted to wait, there was little they could do to oppose her. Only one person had anything to say against her, and it was said in private. "You weren't telling the truth," Luna Lovegood accused her after summoning her in private. Lily raised her ethereal eyebrows in response. About your expert opinion." "My reasoning was sound," Lily defended herself from the very perceptive girl. Even beyond her preternatural abilities to detect Horcruxes and be aware of time loops, she had a natural gift for seeing to the heart of things, a gift that Lily appreciated often but cursed now. "But not the real reason you argued in favor of waiting," Luna said. You're a good person, Lily Evans Potter." "I try to be," she said. "But when it comes to the safety of her child, Luna, no mother is a good person. I certainly broke some rules researching the ritual to protect Harry. I went down some questionable paths, if not dark ones. To trade the slight chance of saving two strangers' lives for the guaranteed safety of my son through a year-long gladiatorial death tournament. One, where there's an incognito death, eater wandering around causing trouble. It's no question at all which path I choose." Luna looked at her piercingly for several minutes before ultimately giving her a slight nod. After that, Lily felt the magic manifesting her in the land of the living release, letting her return for a while to her death. The end of third year came and went, with Trelawney speaking yet another slight variation on the same prophecy she had delivered in every loop that had made it to third year. "It will happen tonight. The Dark Lord lies alone and friendless, abandoned by his followers. His servant has been chained these 12 years. Tonight, before midnight, the servant shall break free and set forth to rejoin his master. The Dark Lord shall rise, greater and more terrible than before. Tonight, before midnight, the servant shall set forth to rejoin his master." Harry considered trying to talk Sirius out of taking him to the Quidditch World Cup. given that he didn't want to watch the exact same one-sided game for a third time, nor experience the post-game riot again. But when Ron pointed out Thatha's family would be taking him no matter what, Harry decided not to bother, for the two of them had a better chance of staying safe together in the hectic Death Eater attack than they did alone. When they returned to school, it was to news of the Triwizard Tournament, bringing excitement to everyone in all four houses, except for 5 particular Gryffindors. Malfoy got ferret-typhid this time around, which was always fun and good for a laugh, since no permanent harm was done, except to the boy's overblown ego. On the morning of the 30th and penultimate day of October, Ron waved his wand around Harry and incanted a spell that all of Harry's friends, even Luna, relatively magically inexperienced as she was, had spent the past 2 months practicing ad nauseam. Tudum core magici, he said clearly, and the spell of protection wrapped itself gently around Harry's magical core, a protection that they would not allow to lapse for the next 8 months. The next evening, 5 friends sat down for an All Hallows Eve feast, watching the ancient, enchanted cup that would set Harry on a collision course for Voldemort once again. Unless, Harry worried briefly, they had done something else to mess up the timeline and change things around. The time for eating, normally something Harry made sure to enjoy, passed in a nervous blur, for soon enough, Headmaster Dumbledore dimmed the lights, bringing the goblet of fire into dramatic focus. A minute of tense waiting passed before it began to shoot of slips of parchment, slips marked with the names of the Triwizard champions. Victor Crumb, Dumbledore called, and Harry let out a slight breath of relief. Fleur de Lacquer, the brilliantly inventive Pottvila, which would be a worthy opponent, especially during the curse-breaking task. Cedric Diggory, Harry cheered for the boy who had been his housemate and friend once upon a time loop, the boy who had been murdered as a useless spare, the boy who had won the tournament when it was untouched by Harry's participation and the interference of Voldemort's servant, the boy who had delivered Luna's critical message and given them the identity of the final Horcrux. Cedric Diggory, Harry swore, would come out of this tournament alive and well. Harry suddenly felt something magical approaching him, a band of fire wrapping around his core in an intricate weave as it bound him to compete in the Triwizard Tournament. But the binding did not hurt him, for his friend's magic provided a barrier between the binding and his immature magical core. He gave his friends a brief nod as Dumbledore caught the 4th slip in shock and read out the name it bore, Harry Potter. The argument in the antechamber went horribly, to put it lightly. Headmasters Maxime and Karkaroff were accusing everyone from Hogwarts of cheating, with their students de Lacquer and Crumb not far behind. All the while, Dumbledore tried to maintain order. McGonagall stuck up for Dumbledore. Moody spat out a likely accurate theory for how Harry had been entered in between all of his paranoia, and Snape made an appearance just to denigrate Harry. Since he was a Gryffindor this time, not a Slytherin like he'd been 2 loops ago, Harry wasn't exactly sure why he had been in that meeting in the first place other to make Harry's life miserable. Harry and his mum had talked about Severus Snape, their childhood friendship, the incidents that brought about their falling out, and the fact, learned early on and never forgotten by any of them despite Snape's horrible behavior, that the potion's master was a double agent for the light and would remain loyal to Lily Evans, or at least his memory of her, until his final, tortured breath at the Dark Lord's feet. Lily wasn't impressed with her old friend's behavior toward her son, however, no matter its necessity for his cover. Did any of them bring up the potential damage to your core? Hermione asked once Harry had managed to make his way through the impromptu post-selection party in Gryffindor Tower and reach his dorm. Hermione and Luna, both being allowed into the boys' areas, were already waiting there along with Neville and Ron. Harry had made sure to summarize the meeting for them as soon as he'd settled down in the company of friends instead of enemies. Harry shook his head. No, they didn't. And given that that crowd included many specialists in magical education, including 2 people meant to be directly responsible for my well-being, it was a moot point. In fact, it actually made things easier if nobody was questioning how Harry was going to be performing so many feats of powerful magic without risking permanent core damage. Still, it all made them lose faith a little more in the people who were supposed to be protecting them. "Enough of that," said Neville. "Our teachers will do what they do, and it's not up to us to deal with that. The real question is this: you have 3 weeks to prepare, Harry. How are you going to be facing your dragon?" They were going under the assumption that Harry would be facing the Hungarian Horntail, the most dangerous and challenging of his potential draconic opponents, just like he had in the previous loop. "I want to make it a show," Harry said. "I want to let my magic loose in public for once, and this is the perfect opportunity to do so." All of them nodded, for they had long grown used to hiding their abilities in public, but had never grown to enjoy it. "How will we explain it away?" Hermione asked, forcing herself to be the voice of reason. "Gryffindor is going to turn away from me, at least until the first task," Harry predicted. "I can already tell, just reading that common room downstairs. So we isolate ourselves for the next few weeks until the task and blame it intensive training." Ron raised his eyebrows at him. "You think they'll buy that?" "I," Harry declared haughtily, "am the boy who lived. I can do anything." He managed to maintain a Malfoy-esque visage of arrogance for about 5 seconds before breaking down laughing, his friends following suit shortly thereafter. Despite the comedic value, Harry had a point. The legend of the boy who lived would let him do incredible things, with few people batting an eye. Not to mention, Harry would get to enjoy some time away from Gryffindor House, which, of all the houses of Hogwarts, was the one that most encouraged immaturity of the kind. Harry and his friends had grown out of over 2 decades of being students. Harry, indeed, drew the largest and nastiest figurine from Bagman's bag, the Hungarian Horntail. All according to plan, he thought as he waited for his opponents to finish their attempts at defeating a dragon. He had made sure that Cedric was informed, lest the Hufflepuff boy go to face a dragon entirely unprepared and die in the process. When his name was called, Harry did not let himself feel a hint of fear or nervousness. Why should he? He had faced dragons before, as well as basilisks, and now he would have every skill in his arsenal available for the fight. Only his wandless magic and animagus form would remain his secret weapons. So he and his friends had decided in one of their conferences on the subject. His first move was simple. With a wave of his wand, a muttered incantation, no need to show off non-verbal just it, Harry conjured a condor, a massive bird of prey from the Americas that he'd studied over the past few weeks in order to distract the dragon from above. He added in a collection of carnivores transfigured from rocks on the ground, ranging from vicious baying hounds to snarling lions. And lastly, in a departure from his pattern of predators, he transfigured a pair of kangaroos, whom he directed to circle around the outside of the arena in either direction. With his menagerie of helpers completed, Harry began to engage the dragon directly, shooting powerful curses in the direction of its face. Nothing to risk the dragon going on a trampling rampage like Victor Crumbs had, but enough to draw its attention to him. When the dragon tried to retaliate with fire, Harry was ready with a massive, swirling gout of conjured water which met the blast head-on. Even with claws pecking at its eyes from above and its feet from below, the dragon had a ravenous intelligence in its eyes, an intelligence that correctly identified Harry as the real threat. And so the dragon pulled on its chains, which thankfully held, as it moved to attack him. Harry did not flinch, though seamlessly conjuring himself a steel sword to wield in his offhand, deflecting the Horntail's talons with one swipe, while he raised the stone arena floor to entrap the tail as it swung at him. All the while, his kangaroo creations had not been idle. The one which Harry had sent left reached the Horntail's nest first, and acting on the instructions that Harry had imbued into the marsupial constructs upon their creation, grasped at the golden egg and slid it into her pouch. Harry spotted this out of the corner of his eye and grinned in satisfaction, though he didn't let up on his spellwork as he continued to duel the dragon. The kangaroo was slower hopping back to him, but better protected, as Harry sent all of his conjured and transfigured animals to guard it. Pushing the dragon back with a massive gust of wind, Harry finally got a direct line of sight to the kangaroo and summoned it toward him with a shouted Akiakangaru. Reversing the transfigurations left him with a pile of rocks around him and one golden egg, still gleaming, sitting on the ground. Raising a shield around himself with his wand arm, he grasped at the golden egg with his free arm and made a retreat out of the arena. And Harry Potter proves that he is the boy who lived indeed, Bagman's amplified voice shouted excitedly, with a stupendous performance in the first of 5 tasks of the Triwizard Tournament. Madame Pomfrey fussed over him, even though the dragon hadn't even come close to hurting him with its flame or its body. The caring matron and healer was just like that. She was interrupted in her ministrations by 3 friends rushing into the medical tent to give him huge hugs and congratulations on his success, and one small girl running up to plant a firm kiss straight on his lips, which made him smile. And when he saw 4 tens from the judges and 1 3 from a disgruntled Igor Karkaroff, Harry couldn't help but smile even more, for he had proven himself and his power to the world. Chapter 34, Harry's Scar. In Harry's opinion, the Yule Ball was a single bright spot of pure, simple joy in a year of worry and danger and excitement. Harry, of course, took Luna as his date. They enjoyed opening the ball with a more formal dance before switching to more casual styles, as the pair thoroughly enjoyed themselves dancing the night away. Hermione let Victor ask her for the 3rd time, even knowing that it would be just a single date, a single night, but one where she clearly had fun, since she kept going back for more. She was a teenage girl getting a date with, objectively, the most attractive wizard in the castle. Unattached as she was, why would she turn it down? Ron, meanwhile, had snagged Lavender Brown for the evening, though Harry doubted their particular pairing would last. Maybe the Ron who had existed at the start of the loop could have made good a romance with Lavender. But unless Lavender showed heretofore hidden depths to her character, her dance with Ron was going to remain just that, one dance. And lastly, Neville, who had dived into an intense relationship with Hannah Abbott now that he knew this was the final loop, had the Hufflepuff girl he loved across loops on his arm. Harry would call it as close to a perfect ball for him and his close friends as he could possibly envision. When it came to preparing for the second task, Harry was split between the runic rebreather and Finn's option from the previous loop, or a powerfully magical transformative plant called gillyweed, which Neville was advocating. Both had their advantages. Gillyweed was an all-in-one solution which provided breathing, cold resistance, and locomotion. However, it also would last for exactly 1 hour, neither longer nor shorter, a fact about which Harry wasn't exactly happy. The use of a series of enchanted objects allowed more flexibility when it came to how long he was going to stay under, but he would lack the natural underwater instincts that gillyweed gave its user, and would be at risk of freezing or drowning or both, should any of the runic enchantments be damaged or lost. "It's not like I can just be Moses and split the waters," Harry grumbled to Luna, as his girlfriend encouraged him to find a 3rd solution, one which would use his available power to the fullest. "Couldn't you?" she asked, looking at him piercingly. "I mean, flat out splitting a lake is beyond even all 4 of us working together," Harry said, running a rough calculation of the power required for such a feat. "But," Harry put on a wide grin, "I do have a very good idea. Thank you, Luna." And so, on a cold January day, with the entirety of the Hogwarts student body, along with domestic and foreign dignitaries in attendance, Harry prepared to dive into the lake to retrieve Luna. Of course, he wasn't going to be diving in directly. As Victor Crumb transformed himself into a potshark and Fleur de Lacquer and Cedric applied bubbles around their heads, Harry did nothing save point his wand back toward the school and shout, "Accio!" Strictly speaking, he could have brought what he was summoning with him, but this was for dramatic effect. A wooden object came zooming through the air above the stands and smacked into Harry's waiting hand. He swung his right leg up and over it, mounting his firebolt broom, the best gift he had ever received in every timeline, and taking off. "And what is Harry Potter doing?" Bagman questioned over the loudspeaker. "This is an underwater task, not an aerial one." But despite the ex-beater's skepticism, Harry did have a plan. He followed a combination of his own memories of the second task and a tracking charm he had placed on Luna's left third toenail, that particular location at her precise insistence, to reach a spot almost directly above the merfolk village. Pointing his wand downward, he created a small vortex in the lake's surface, a vortex which he allowed to swallow him as he flew downward. Instead of a mere bubblehead, Harry was using his magic to maintain a cocoon of air around his entire body, which, among other things, allowed his firebolt to function optimally. It also had a more sturdy border than the fragile bubblehead charm, repelling a Grindylow with ease should it come to that. Soon enough, Harry saw the ground approaching and pulled up in a perfect Ransky feint as a flying broomstick began to circle a deep underwater statue. Spotting Luna, he levitated a knife he'd brought with him to sever her bands before gently flying toward her still form and pulling her into the bubble, which immediately woke her up. As they flew back upward, Luna used a bit of her own wandless magic to make herself warm and dry. Within minutes, the surface of the lake was breached, and a firebolt now bearing 2 passengers made a slow and triumphant return to the shore, where a fairly bored but now intrigued audience, a panel of impressed judges, and a worried school healer were waiting for them. Even Karkaroff couldn't dock Harry too many points for this one. For the third task, Harry actually faced a greater challenge than he had in his previous time through the tournament. After all, stab it with a basilisk fang wasn't a subtle or versatile strategy, and Harry wanted to flex his more theoretical magic skills, the things he had learned in Hermione's school of advanced runes, charms, and arithmancy. Of all the possible tasks they could have chosen, the creation and countering of magical protections was an area which required both power and cleverness, and in which cleverness could sometimes, but not always, beat power. Harry planned to bring both to the table in both aspects of the third task. The breaking in part of the task, however, was for later. First he had to build his own box. The rather silly triggered potion gun concept from long ago was easily discarded, for now that Harry was capable of casting spells in the pursuit of this task, he had many more options. He started making his protected boxes by using mining charms to dig deep into the bedrock below Hogwarts, extracting samples of the same ancient, sturdy, and powerful stone that the founders had quarried to build the castle itself. Such stone was capable of holding powerful enchantments, but was difficult to find independently for an above-average student or even an above-average adult wizard. Then again, Harry was far more than just above average. Harry had 6 weeks between the second and third tasks, and he planned to use all 6 of those weeks wisely. The first 2 weeks were spent digging up the stone and forming it through careful shape transfigurations into 3 moderately sized boxes, about the size of a bread box, said a raucously laughing Hermione. Sometimes Harry envied Hermione for all of her Muggle cultural knowledge that he had missed out on while being stuck in a cupboard. The box was carved with various runes that would anchor and amplify all of the spells placed on the box. In the third week, Harry cast the most important component of the protections, which consisted of perhaps the most potent charm in the wizarding world. The Fardelius, the same spell that had protected his parents, the spell whose effects he had learned as he studied his own inability to speak of the time loop. Neville had been chosen by coin toss as the secret keeper of not 1 but 3 secrets. The statue in box ABC is hidden in the back corner. The incredibly powerful spell took a lot out of him, but he managed to get through 3 castings of it, secreting the 3 statues away. From there, Harry proceeded to apply a difficult technique, perhaps one of the most difficult in enchantment, the technique of layering. Different spells on the same object could interfere with each other, which was why it was so difficult to make complex magical objects like broomsticks, which had half a dozen major charms on it and dozens of minor ones, all of which had to exist in harmony. To layer multiple enchantments onto a single object, therefore, required both immense theoretical knowledge of each spell's properties and precise control of one's own magic in the casting. Harry had both, and so he spent each night of his third week layering spells onto the stone to make it absolutely impenetrable to any form of physical harm. The fifth week passed similarly, but with spells to resist various common and obscure forms of magical destruction. In the sixth and final week, Harry added in a variety of charms and enchantments, which were designed by him and his friends over the past few years to confuse and redirect known ward-breaking techniques. They wouldn't stand up to a professional like Bill Weasley for long, but for the purposes of a school competition, they would suffice. When the time came for the third task, Harry made sure to have Neville deliver a handwritten slip with all three secrets to the judges, lest they accuse him of failing to actually put his statue inside the box. He just hoped that Karkaroff wouldn't cheat by giving out the secret, or that Dumbledore, who had been personally handed the slip of secrets, would stop him. But as he faced his, he didn't worry about such things. Instead, he focused on the three boxes in front of him. Picking one at random, he began by blasting it with a powerful but broad-spectrum countercharm, which caused the magical protections on the box to flicker, allowing Harry to follow through by a well-timed confringo to blow the box apart. It didn't work entirely, but there was visible damage, so he repeated the process again and again. When the box finally was destroyed, Harry wouldn't let himself fall for a trick like Fleur's again, so he made sure to check the visible statue for any additional traps before grasping it. One went down, and the next two followed similarly, Harry using his natural power and two-spell technique to slip physically damaging spells past the box's outer protections. About 20 minutes after starting, he had three statues in hand. Meanwhile, he knew that his Fidelius would keep his own boxes entirely safe. A well-done task, all in all. Oh, and at some point between the second and third tasks, Rita Skeeter suddenly stopped publishing her salacious insinuations and lies about Harry, Hermione, and all of their friends. How exactly this was achieved, Harry did not know, only that Hermione had smirked when Harry had noted the sudden change in the Beatles' rhetoric. Harry loved the girl, but she could be terrifying when she wanted to be, or Rebecca Sesh could be terrifying. The approaching fourth task posed a simple question for Harry. Would he show off his skills on the Firebolt or use Stormswift as his mount once more? Sure, the Firebolt would let him navigate the Griffin part of the challenge, but Harry had found bonding with, training, and riding Stormswift was one of the most rewarding experiences of all of his many time-looped years. So, he ended up asking Ludo Bagman, am I restricted to just one method magical flight? No, Bagman said. If you really want to bring a backup broom in case your first one fails, we won't stop you, but you'd have to switch brooms midair. Harry gave him a grateful smile, and then proceeded to show up on the day of the fourth task with his right hand, gently petting Stormswift's red feathers, and his left hand holding a shrunken firebolt, which he proceeded to deposit in his pocket. There was really nothing like flying on the back of a true natural flying beast, Harry mused as he prepared himself to let loose his noise spell to bypass the Stymphalian swarm, except maybe flying as a bird himself. With Stormswift singing in cacophony with Harry's own voice and spell, the Greek magical birds were entirely in disarray and easy to defend from. While Stormswift took him through the slalom, Harry drew out his shrunken broom, re-enlarged it, and prepared for the central and most challenging component of the task, the griffins. Patting Stormswift on her neck, he let himself fall off the hippogriff's left side, mounting the firebolt and pulling up within a few seconds of free fall. While Stormswift flew around distracting one of the griffins, Harry put the most powerful shield he knew around himself as he charged straight past the other griffin. rolling to avoid its rapidly beating wings and snatching one of the golden crowns from the pillar. Whistling in a pattern of two short, one long indicated to Stormswift to proceed to the next phase of the obstacle course, Harry pushing the firebolt to catch up with her and return to his spot on her back before they reached the first 180-degree turn. The rest of the course went entirely smoothly, letting Harry finish even faster than he had the last time, not that he was expecting any less. With not even superstar Crumb putting up a faster time than him, Harry secured victory in all four of the first four tasks. Only two key events remained before Harry was to enter the fifth task maze on the night of 24 June. The first was on the night of the task reveal, when Victor once again pulled him aside to confirm that he was not in any way romantically interested in Hermione. During this conversation, Harry once again encountered a delirious Bartemius Crouch and volunteered to stay with the rambling man while Victor ran to Hogwarts for help. Once Victor had gone, Harry tried to use legilimency to get answers out of the man, but his mind was far too messed up to get anything coherent, at least for someone of Harry's admittedly mediocre skill in the mind arts. Once Victor arrived with Professor Moody, Harry internally frowned. The paranoid aura and his magical super eye would see right through his plan to trail Crouch under his invisibility cloak to determine who would try to kill the head of international magical cooperation. Instead, he resigned himself to considering the events of this night a dead end. Still, he tried to stay with Crouch to protect him, walking with Moody, and the now unconscious man, Moody, had insisted that he was possibly Imperius-controlled and thus dangerous, back to the castle and to the hospital wing. Hoping that Madame Pomfrey's watchful eye would keep the wizard safe, Harry left for his dorms with an uneasy feeling. The next morning, Crouch was reported missing from the hospital wing. Harry and his friends presumed him dead, another person whom they failed to save. "It's not your responsibility to save everyone," his mother insisted a few days later. "But Mum, we have all this foreknowledge," Harry protested. "And you did the best you could," she comforted him. "The hospital wing should have been safe, and the fact that it wasn't only makes me more sure of my decisionato. Do the ritual early." "Are you ready for it?" Harry asked, changing the subject from his lingering guilt toward his hope for the future. Lily's shade nodded. "I'm ready, so are all of your friends." Weeks passed anxiously as Harry and his friends ran through their spell fighting drills in every free moment. From waking up to going to bed, they were exchanging hexes and curses. Only in classes, in the great hall, did they cease their practice, afraid of revealing themselves before the eye of the public, and especially before the eye of the still unknown Death Eater. And on the night of 23 June, the night before the fifth task was to take place, Harry undressed himself and donned simple ritual robes. They were basically a sheet of pure, unprocessed cotton, not even bleached to be white, but retaining their natural brown color, cut into a shape that could cover Harry, all while minimizing magical interference with the ritual. Magical ingredients were being scattered around him in intricate patterns as he laid down with his arms and legs spread, as if imitating Da Vinci's Vitruvian Man. To these ingredients were added perhaps the most potent ingredients, the blood of his friends Ron, Hermione, Neville, and Luna, as well as the blood of Petunia and Dudley Dursley. How his friends had managed to secure this, especially given that the blood had to be willing given, Harry did not know, but he wanted nothing more to do with his living blood family, so he let it be. His friends circled around him, with the shade of his mother taking up position directly above his head. They began to chant in harmony, chanting in a beautiful, rhythmic language. It was called Aramaic, Harry knew, a close relative of Hebrew and the language which his mother had used in the casting of the original sacrificial rite. The magic grew and swirled all around him and through him. The magic drew his attention to two links he had never been able to sense before, one malevolent one tugging at his forehead, the other a protective one attached to his magical core. The latter link surged upward toward the former, the two twisting around each other in a violent clash and a beautiful dance. And then it was over. Harry felt both of those links still, but in their absence. "It's done," his mum whispered. "Are you all right, baby?" "I am, Mum. I feel them gone, the Horcrux in the loop." "It's time for the tests, then," Hermione declared, signaling for Luna to go fetch the necessary component for the first test. A snake they had summoned a few hours earlier. A snake whose hisses Harry had then heard as spoken English due to the magic of Parseltongue, and now a snake which Harry could not understand at all. "It's just hissing," he reported with a smile on his lips and a tear in his eye. As much as he had despised it as a sign of being different and then as a sign of being a Horcrux, Parseltongue had been a unique talent, one which had proven useful, and now it was his no longer. For the second test, Hermione leaned into Neville's ear and whispered a series of random words, words which Harry and Hermione had secretly chosen before the ritual. "Correct, horse, battery, staple." Harry saw his friend's lips move, even though she was speaking too softly to hear. Neville nodded that he'd gotten the words and allowed Hermione to point her wand at him, preparing to cast a spell that, if the loop was still intact, would send them back in time 4 years. "Obliviate," Hermione said flatly. A burst of magic shot from her wand into Neville's brain for a moment, and then it was over. "What are the words, Hermione?" Neville asked, confused. "I thought we were going to proceed to the second test now." "We did," Ron informed him, causing Neville to grin slightly despite his lack of memory. "The test passed. Now it's time for the third one." Ron went off to the Gryffindor common room and searched out his sister, easily finding her locks of long, Weasley-red hair bouncing around happily as she chatted with her friends. She had done so well, Ron thought happily, without the diary weighing her down. She had a happy, carefree life. And even if the time loop had caused them to grow apart, Ron still trusted her more than anyone outside of his fellow time travelers. "Hey, Ginny," he greeted, causing her to turn from her conversation to give Ron a somewhat sour look. "Sorry for interrupting, but I need to talk to you for a minute, in private." Ginny frowned but complied, coming over to the corner of the common room where Ron set up a quick privacy spell. The end of the loop was all the more reason to increase their caution, as Mad-Eye Moody had taught them constant vigilance. "All right, this is going to be weird, but please bear with me," he said to his sister. "I'm going to tell you something, and then I want you to repeat it back to me." Ginny nodded. "The first time I fought a troll, Neville wasn't there." "The first time you fought a troll, Neville wasn't there," Ginny repeated before continuing on confusedly. "But I thought Hugh was. Believe me, I remember the fit Mum got into when your letter came about that. Worse than the one about Pettigrew. What was this about?" Ron just gave her an enigmatic smile and a wink. "I'll tell you tomorrow, or maybe the day after, Gin. I promise. And I'm sorry I haven't been a very good big brother to you the past 4 years. The past 20 years. A very weirded-out Ginny flounced off back to her friends, leaving Ron standing in the corner. "Test 3 complete," he muttered to himself. "Everything has been undone. No second chances now." Chapter 35. No Second Chances. The morning of the 5th task dawned bright and cloudless, as befitting a June day shortly after the start of summer. On the Hogwarts Quidditch pitch, a magical hedge maze which had been growing for the past month had finally reached its full height due to the careful tending of one Pomona sprout. It was ready to receive the 4 powerful and skilled wizards who, having survived and defeated the previous challenges of the Triwizard Tournament, were going to enter it and traverse it in order to claim the tournament's ultimate prize. Or at least, that was the case for the 3 proper competitors. The 4th and unwilling champion, Harry Potter, sought the Triwizard Cup for an entirely different reason, because he knew it would lead him to fulfilling his destiny, to fulfilling the goal that he had worked toward for the past 20 years of his temporally complex life. It would lead him to the graveyard at Little Hangleton, where his blood would be taken to resurrect Voldemort, and where he would muster all of the skill and power he possessed in order to defeat him. As a Triwizard champion, he was given the opportunity to spend the day before the final task with his family, which, to him, meant Sirius and Remus. His animagus godfather and werewolf knew Harry well enough to tell that he was extremely nervous, though they couldn't be faulted for misinterpreting the cause of those nerves. "You don't have to be worried," Sirius tried to reassure him, his words falling flat as Harry knew that his godfather was hardly aware of the full extent of what was going to be happening that night. "You crushed the first 4 tasks. A nasty maze won't pose a problem for you." "Indeed," Remus agreed, the ex-professor giving him a hug of encouragement, which Harry accepted gratefully. "You're the most exceptional young wizard I've ever met, and the best of all those I taught last year, from first year through 7th. You don't need to worry about the maze." "I'm not worried about the maze," said Harry, reveling in being able to actually reveal some of what he was in the long habit of keeping secret. "We still don't know who put my name in the goblet, or for what purpose. It could have been some boy who lived fan trying to give you a chance to shine," Sirius offered with a half-hearted smile. They all knew his theory wouldn't hold water. "And did so using dark magic?" Harry questioned, a tinge of sarcasm infusing his voice. "No, there's something very wrong afoot with this tournament, Padfoot, and I have a feeling it's all going to come to a head tonight. I've done my best to prepare for the task and for whatever comes after, but still, I'm nervous. I don't get any second chances at this. If I screw up, if I get hurt, if I die." "You're not going to die," Padfoot told him forcefully. "The teachers will be monitoring the maze. Dumbledore will intervene personally if anything goes wrong. And even if they can't, you have the skill and power and bravery to pull through. And besides," Remus added, "nobody ever gets second chances." "If only you knew, Uncle Mooney," Harry thought as the ex-professor continued his philosophical musings. "No, we just have to take every moment as it comes, give our full effort, and live with what happens. Learn from our past, plan and hope for the future, and above all, know that while things won't always go our way, so long as we do our best, we need not have regrets. That's life, for better or for worse. Time moves forward always, and what is now past can never be regained. Time is neutral," a great muggle once said. "It can be used either constructively or destructively." He was talking about the need to work for justice for the oppressed, and perhaps it applies to us in that sense. About how the forces of good must use their time well, lest the unrelenting forces of evil use it better. About how, if we let go now of our opportunities to make the world better, those opportunities will never come again. And it applies to our own lives as well. We can't change the past. Harry was trusting Wormtail a mistake. Yes. If I could go back and do it again, would I tell your parents just to use Sirius instead and spit in the rat's Death Eater face? Yes, I would. But I can't, so instead, I've chosen to move forward. To be the Uncle Mooney you deserve to have in your life from the start. To rebuild my relationship with Padfoot, reforming the bonds between us that a decade of false accusations and Azkaban broke. To remember James and Lily how they lived, brilliant and clever, brave and bold, loving and caring, and to honor how they died by doing my best for you, their son. So, Harry, whatever happens tonight, whether it's a big nothing or a Death Eater ritual or something else entirely, I know for a fact that so long as you face it with courage, face it with cleverness, face it with all the strength I know you possess, you will be successful. You will look back on this day without regret, as a day of victory and of triumph." Remus paused, and the 3 wizards perambulated the grounds of Hogwarts in silence for a while, enjoying the warm sun shining down upon them. "This," Harry mused on Remus's discourse, "is my life now. I've spent so long knowing that I had a safety net, that none of my choices really mattered, that I need to relearn now how to make choices with consequences, to face my battles without the armor of time around me. Can I do it?" The cruel, serpentine face of Voldemort reborn flashed before his eyes. But then other images did too. Ron facing the Gringotts dragon with him. Ron standing up to Voldemort and taunting him even though he was just an untrained 12-year-old. Hermione, her books and quills and parchment all around her, reveling in the joy of learning as she absorbed everything she could read. Hermione, smiling viciously as she achieved victory over Lockhart and Skeeter through words alone, and over the basilisk through the power of her wand. Neville tending to his beloved plants and advising caution. Neville swinging his sword with skill as he charged bravely into battle to defend the Hogwarts Express. And Luna seeing into his heart and finding it worthy of her love. Luna dancing the night away with him in a wintry hall. Luna giggling in delight as she made flowers dance around her in beautiful patterns while learning wandless magic again. Luna joining in on the raids of Azkaban and the gaunt shack even though she lacked the magical power of her friends. Luna, who would be staying behind tonight, but would be waiting for him with her beautiful smile when he got back. Because Harry realized, huge it back, he'd see Voldemort come to an end tonight because he would not permit it otherwise, not when he had something Summonito live for. Harry walked into the fifth task maze alone, his older competitors standing behind him as they awaited their turns. He did not intend to let them even have a chance of winning, a chance of falling into Voldemort's trap. Efficiency, he knew, was the key. While he'd gone for flamboyant displays of power and magical skill in the previous tasks, this task was only a prelude to the night's main event, and so he would not expend much if any power. Instead, like he had in his first time through the tournament, he conjured himself a very nice steel sword, which would allow him to take on some of the obstacles without having to use his magic. Harry had prepared extensively, of course, coming up with solutions to every obstacle he had faced, as well as all of the obstacles that Cedric, Crumb, and Delacour had talked about facing in the previous loop. Boggarts, which still took the form of Dementors, were given fuskier robes instead of black, and their hands were replaced with foam ones of the kind usually seen at Muggle sporting events. The Sphinx would be bypassed easily, Harry having brushed up on the riddle-solving skills he'd earned in his Ravenclaw days. Various curses and enchantments Harry had studied and found out the least magic-intensive ways to bypass. The blast-ended Scroots, of course, were some of his greatest challenges, and he seemed to keep encountering them, but a simple application of a flame-freezing charm to himself to prevent burns allowed him to get up close and personal with the hybridized monstrosities and stab them with his sword. By the time he'd gotten past the Sphinx, Harry had heard all three cannons go off, indicating that he was far from alone in the maze. Still, he'd been efficient despite the numerous obstacles that had found themselves in his way, a far greater number than last time, which just stunk of Death Eater interference, and was well on track to reach the Triwizard Cup first, and more importantly, alone. He wouldn't allow Cedric even the chance of becoming the murdered spare, even if meant being unsportsmanlike and hitting the boy with a stunner should they encounter each other. Cedric Diggory would not be today. In the stands, he knew that his friends were making various plausible excuses to depart the stands and make their way to a hidden alcove where Darby was waiting for them. They would gird themselves in their battle gear, robes enchanted with powerful magical protections, several blades inscribed with runes of durability and sharpness, wands in handmade but high-quality holsters, and of course, a basilisk fang in a secure pouch for each of them, before having Darby pop them to a random secluded spot in Little Hangleton, one far, far away from the graveyard lest Voldemort have detection wards set up. Once there, they would make their way as close to the graveyard as they could without alerting Voldemort. But Harry didn't spare too much thought for that, for he trusted his friends would do their parts as he was about to his. As he entered the clearing which held the Triwizard Cup, he put up a weak, temporary spider-repelling ward. It wouldn't hold off the acromantula that he knew was lying in wait for long, but it would give him time to make a rush for the cup. Leaving behind his sword and stowing his wand, he began to sprint across the clearing. The magic of the ward broke as the acromantula began to leap over the hedge, but it was too late. Harry touched the cup and let its portkey magic pull him away. When he landed, he was in an eerie graveyard, one he had last seen from this spot some 8 years before. He extended his magical senses outward, locating 2 other wizards near him, about 10 meters behind him, along with 3 very familiar signatures positioned in an equilateral triangle about 100 meters out. When one of the wizards, Lucius Malfoy, if events were playing out the same, began to approach from behind, Harry was deliberately late in reacting, and he put up a half-hearted battle that involved a few stunning spells before allowing himself to be rendered unconscious by the light-haired aristocrat and Death Eater. When he woke up, he was once again tied to a gravestone, and Lucius Malfoy was examining a very large cauldron. His wand was no longer on him, but sticking out of Malfoy's pocket. With a quick application of wandless magic, Harry summoned a twig to him, transfigured it into a decent replica of his wand, and quickly swapped it out with the real one in Malfoy's pocket before hiding the real one in his empty holster, so it would be easily accessible when the time came. Such a feat was beyond most users of wandless magic, but not beyond Harry, who, along with his friends, had been using wandless magic along with fake wands to complete their 1st through 4th year curriculum, and gotten top marks in all of their practicals anyway. Bone of the father, unknowingly given, you will restore your son. As bone dust floated into the cauldron, completing the 1st step of the resurrection, Harry smiled. Things were coming into place. He used some wandless magic to levitate dirt into the cauldron while Malfoy was bracing himself to cut off his own finger. A bit of contamination of the ritual probably wouldn't help Voldemort and might hurt him significantly. Anything to make the coming battle easier. Flesh of the servant, willingly sacrificed, you will revive your master. Malfoy's show of devotion was less surprising this time, but no less impressive. The cauldron was now prepared for the 3rd and final ingredient, the one for which Harry had been put through the Triwizard Tournament in the first place. He tried to focus on how much Huentid the resurrection to succeed, how much Huentid his blood to be taken. Whether it would make an impact, Harry did not know. Blood of the enemy, forcibly taken, you will resurrect your foe. The cauldron grew blinding white, forcing Harry to shut his eyes. He couldn't use his magic to sense his surroundings, for the rebuilding of Voldemort's body was such a magically potent event that it outshone everything else in the vicinity. And when Harry finally allowed himself to open his eyes, he beheld a sight he hoped he would not see past tonight. Lord Voldemort had risen again. Harry heard a slithering noise, and he craned his head to see a large snake slithering in the corner of his vision. Nagini was here, the last Horcrux to be destroyed, the one that had killed Luna in a previous timeline. All around him, Death Eaters popped in and bowed to their master, begging his forgiveness. So pleased was Lord Voldemort by this that he did not notice what Harry did, that his friends had, in the moments of the resurrection, dashed closer to Harry and were now only 20 or so meters away. Harry tuned out the grandiose speeches until Voldemort turned his full attention to him. He will be allowed to fight, Voldemort was saying, and you will be left in no doubt which of us is the stronger. Now untie him, Lucius, and give him his wand. The Death Eater complied and passed Harry the fake transfigured wand, not that Malfoy knew that. Harry stood up and faced the Dark Lord, letting his magic run through him as it healed the worst of the injuries he'd faced in the maze and then in the graveyard. "You have been taught how to duel, Harry Potter?" Voldemort asked. "I have," Harry agreed. "And before we begin, I have just one question." Voldemort laughed, which caused some of the Death Eaters to flinch. "Very well. What do you wish to know?" "Everyone here. They came back to serve you willingly. They're not under Thempirius like they claimed." "Oh no, Harry Potter. These cowards may have claimed Imperius, but they are my true and willing servants. Does it bother you, boy, that so many wizards would choose to bow to me?" "No," Harry said. I just didn't want any innocents to die." With that, Harry shot out a wandless stunner at Voldemort, who simply laughed again and shielded against the spell. "You think you can kill everyone here, Potter," he mocked. "You're alone." "Am I?" Harry asked just as a spell shot out from within the ranks of cloaked and masked Death Eaters. It was not a nice spell, but a vicious, entrail-expelling curse that was aimed straight at Voldemort. 13 years, Tom," he taunted, "and you think all of them would remain loyal?" More spells began shooting out from within the Death Eater ranks, aiming now at one another. As far as Voldemort and his Death Eaters were concerned, a fight was breaking out between the paranoid Dark Wizards. In fact, the first few spells were not fired by any Death Eater by Ron, who was miniaturized and under Harry's invisibility cloak while being rapidly levitated from place to place by Hermione. Soon, they didn't need to do anything, as a chaotic all-against-all battle began, with every Death Eater turning on his fellows in an attempt to root out the traitor or traitors who had secretly joined Harry Potter. Meanwhile, Voldemort did not get a chance to intervene, because his easy demonstration against the boar who lived was becoming the fight of his life. Harry, having surreptitiously exchanged the fake wand for his real one, was loosing volleys of spells and waves of carefully controlled magic against Voldemort, who was shielding and responding in turn. The two danced a dance of death as they mixed curses and charms and transfigurations in an all-out magical battle, which gave neither of them time to do more than think about their next few moves. In the distance, Neville was under a series of invisibility, silencing, and scent-masking spells as he hunted down Nagini, a sword in one hand and a basilisk fang in the other. The preternatural snake still sensed his coming despite his concealing magic and lunged at him, but he deflected the strike with a strike of his own, using his steel blade to catch Nagini's head on the side. His muscles, earned by long hours of physical exertion over the past 4 years, rippled in effort as he parried the snake's strikes, all while using wandless magic to try to transfigure a trap for her tail. Dancing away from one lunge, Neville willed several metal spikes into existence and shot them at her center. They did not pierce her, but did force her to roll to the side, directly into a rift in the ground Neville had forced into being. The rift sealed around her, containing her movements for 5 seconds as she wriggled free. But 5 seconds were enough for Neville to dart in and slam his sword into her head, shortly followed by the basilisk fang he was carrying. The horrifying, beautiful sound of a Horcrux dying echoed over the battlefield, causing Voldemort to hesitate for a moment as he realized in dismay what had happened. Somehow, his beloved Nagini, his familiar and sole container, had been killed. By the crossfire of his Death Eater's civil war, or by something else, he mused before another wave of magic from Harry Potter forced him back on task. Ron, now full-sized, and Hermione had transfigured themselves Death Eater regalia and waded into the fray. They targeted any and every Death Eater they could, except each other. Though they bore the same clothes as the other Death Eaters, the two of them could recognize each other by years of long familiarity with each other's magic and fighting styles. Having confirmed that none of the Death Eaters were innocents or Imperius victims, they had no mercy for their enemies. These upstanding citizens were murderers and torturers and rapists who had gotten away with it due to their money. Society had not given them justice, and so it fell to them to do so instead. When the scream of a dying Horcrux reached their ears, they spared a moment to smile before redoubling their efforts. Near the now empty cauldron, two mighty wizards continued to exchange spells. Harry saw that his opponent was faltering, a sign of the newness of his body or of the subtle interferences in his rebirth ritual. Harry did not know and did not particularly care, only that it gave him the opportunity he needed. He felt Neville approaching behind him and send a single spell in the direction of Voldemort, Expelliarmus. One of the easiest spells to counter, and counter it Voldemort did, but he was caught so off guard by it that in the time it took him to block it, Harry managed to shoot 5 blasting curses, two of which managed to connect, throwing the Dark Lord back onto the ground. "You are dead, Tom Marvolo Riddle," Harry spat, as he continued to barrage the rapidly weakening Dark Lord with powerful spells. One of them managed to catch Voldemort's wand hand, rendering it useless. "You should have died a long time ago." Could Harry kill a man who was down? For all the crimes he had committed in the past, for all the crimes Hugh have committed in other timelines, the answer was yes. Defindo Maxima, Defindo Maxima. Voldemort's attempt at a wandless shield broke with the first spell, and his life ended with the second. Chapter 36. Stories live on forever. By the time that Harry killed Voldemort, most of the Death Eaters had been downed by their comrades or by Ron and Hermione. The plot to sow confusion and discord among the Death Eaters was Ron's idea, and perhaps his most brilliant one, in Harry's opinion. During the Express battle, Hermione and Neville had barely managed to hold the Death Eater forces off despite having the advantage of the element of surprise on their side. Ron had known that they would need an even greater advantage if they wanted to get out of this battle with all of the Death Eaters dead and all of the four of them alive, and he had made one. Tired as he was, Harry still came over to help mop up the remaining Death Eaters. It was 4 against 7, which within 5 minutes became 4 against 3, and then 4 against 0, as the group of well-practiced students dealt with the powerful but out-of-practice adults. When all of the Death Eaters and Voldemort were confirmed dead, the 4 teens gathered them up into a single place. Incendio Maxima, Neville incanted. He was the most physically tired but least magically exhausted of the 4 of them, having dealt with Nagini using minimal spellwork. Burn the evidence wasn't always the best strategy, but it would suffice for now. They also cast some spells to repair the damage to the graveyard, as well as to muddle their magical signatures in case anyone managed to find this place as part of the investigation into the Death Eaters' deaths. The trace they knew they wouldn't have to worry about. After all, Voldemort would have found a way to block it so that his grand resurrection and duel wouldn't be interrupted by an owl from the misuse of magic office. The fact that no such owl had appeared for any of the 4 of them only went to prove that their assumption had been accurate. "We did it," said Harry. "We actually did it." "Of course we did," Ron said. "After 2 decades of this, how could we not?" "We saved the wizarding world," Hermione mused. "We stopped Voldemort's second rise, and nobody will ever know." "Why not?" asked Harry. "If we tell our story to the public," Neville pointed out, "we'll get a lot of scrutiny, a lot of public approval and possibly disapproval, especially for how we dealt with the final battle, and a not insignificant chance of being kidnapped for study by the Department of Mysteries." Harry nodded, shuddering at the thought of the very creepy and secretive organization. He'd heard some stories about them from his classmates over the loops, all of which sounded fantastical even for the magical world. But they also had a grain of truth in them. Only the Unspeakables knew what the Unspeakables did, and if they really wanted something done, they had the resources and magical skill to do it. If they studied time magic, as his mum had suspected, then they would definitely want to study the time loopers. "No, thank you." "Back to the castle?" Harry asked, as he meandered over to where the Triwizard Cup was sitting innocently, some distance from the scene of the battle. "Back to the castle," the others chorused. "Dobby?" Harry asked. The elf popped in, looked around, and squealed in glee. "Master Harry Potter, sir, is being winning," he exclaimed. "He is defeating he who must not be named." "I did," Harry told the house elf, "and now it's time for my friends to get back to Hogwarts." "Dobby is doing," the house elf said. Dobby quickly grabbed Ron's hand, and the pair disappeared before the house. Elf returned alone for Neville, and then for Hermione. Harry waited a few more minutes for his friends to get back into position, for the sake of not arousing suspicion, before grasping the Triwizard Cup and letting it portkey him back to the winner's podium. When Harry landed, still not managing to remain upright on arrival, he arrived to a scene of panic. Apparently, Cedric had gotten to the center and fought off the acromantula, only to realize that the Triwizard Cup was no longer on its plinth. Sending up red sparks to get help, he had been rescued out of the maze by a very confused Professor Sprout, who had proceeded to raise a fuss about why and how the Triwizard Cup had gone missing. As Fleur de Lacquer and Victor Crumb were retrieved from the maze, it was then discovered that Harry himself was also missing, which caused even more panic. Harry turned to the stands and caught Hermione's eye, the look on her face assuring him that she and the others had managed to avoid any suspicion over why they had been absent for most of these proceedings. With his sudden return, all attention turned toward him. "The cup took me to some dark place," Harry said, when the officials demanded some sort of explanation for his mysterious absence. He would tell a heavily edited version of the truth, though certainly not the whole truth. That would be reserved for Luna and Maybeth, Sirius and Remus. I thought it might be an extra secret part of the fifth task, so stayed there and explored for a while. When I found nothing, I decided to try touching the cup again, and it took me back here. While Minister Fudge seemed satisfied by this, if more than a bit confused, proceeding to start the award ceremony in which he gave a long, grandiose speech and gave Harry a large bag of gold. Dumbledore seemed to sense that Harry was lying, which, given that the time loop's protections were no longer in place to help keep his secrets, made sense. The old wizard was known for being crafty and observant. Sirius and Remus were the first ones to greet him when he stepped off the winner's podium, and he gratefully accepted their hugs of comfort and support. In those moments, everything was all right. Voldemort was dead, he had a family who loved him, and he was at peace. Hermione, Ron, and Neville followed shortly after, giving him shallow congratulations on his victory in the Triwizard Tournament, as was expected of them. Luna, though first in his heart, was last. She came up to him, grabbed his head, and proceeded to plant a very firm kiss on his lips. Harry just accepted the highly public display of his girlfriend's affection and enjoyed it, even as some of the people around him were scandalized. He had just fought a dark lord that would have terrorized and killed them all. He would kiss his girlfriend in public if he wanted to. With his personal greetings done, his professors and classmates were next. Seamus and Dean gave him huge cheers, and Malfoy and his goons gave him sneers, but neither impacted him much at all. "You made James and Lily proud today," Professor McGonagall said to him. "You won fair and square, kid," said Cedric, as Harry shared a handshake with the very much alive boy. "You're a Hogwarts champion, and you won it for the school." "It was an honor to compete against you, Cedric," Harry said magnanimously. "Against all of you," he added, addressing both Victor Crumb, who was coming up to him alone, and Fleur de Lacquer, who was being accompanied by, of all people, Ron's eldest brother Bill. What was happening there, he wondered. Well, he knew that romance, if Bill and Fleur being together was romantic, was a thing that could happen in many ways. The line of well-wishers was nice enough for a while, even if the victory they were all congratulating him for wasn't the real victory of the night. But eventually, he grew tired and begged off to go and get some sleep. Pushing his way through the crowds with his friends playing interference behind him, he finally got free of them and began a wonderfully silent walk back to Gryffindor Tower. "Good job out there, kid," came the gravelly voice of Professor Moody from the shadows. He hadn't seen much of the disfigured teacher that day, but he greatly respected the man's abilities and teachings. Harry had instinctively spun around and drew his wand to point at the source of the voice, before he had realized who it was, upon which Harry relaxed. "Constant vigilance," Moody yelled. "Never assume you're alone. There could be assassins lurking for you in every corner." The paranoid ex-Auror began to chuckle, though Harry didn't particularly understand what Moody had said that he considered so funny. "Thank you, sir," Harry said, "but I'm rather tired and I'd like to get to bed." "Just one thing to ask you, kid," Moody said, "about what really happened while you were missing." Harry's level of alertness suddenly quadrupled as he put the pieces together. Nobody in Hogwarts should have known about the events of the graveyard, except for maybe Dumbledore being Dumbledore and the loyal servant. The Death Eater in Hogwarts who was, apparently, Alastor Moody. Before Harry could react, a silent disarming charm shot out of Moody's wand and tore Harry's wand from his hand. Another spell wrapped Harry in ropes, ropes he could easily dispel wandlessly, but refrained from breaking for now. "It's you," Harry breathed, still disbelieving. "His loyal servant." "It was," the man agreed with a wicked smile. "It was he who put your name in the goblet, who watched you through the 5 tasks, ready to step in and aid you should you falter, not that you needed it, who trapped the Triwizard Cup to take you to my lord and master." "But you're," Harry protested, trying to buy time to come up with a plan. "You're the most famous dark wizard catcher in a century, the bane of the Death Eaters. Why did you betray your cause?" Moody laughed. "You really still think I'm Alastor Moody, do you?" An alarm on his watch rang, causing the maybe-not an aura to smirk. "It's about time I got to enjoy my own body." As Harry watched, not Moody took his eye out as his face began to bubble and reform, revealing a far different and more whole visage. The peg leg popped off as it was replaced by a real one. "Who are you?" Harry asked. "The name is Crouch," the newly revealed Death Eater said. "Bartemius Crouch." "But Crouch is dead," Harry protested. Suddenly, he remembered that there was another Barty Crouch, one who had participated in the attack on Neville's parents, one who was supposed to have died in Azkaban. "Bartemius Crouch, Jr.," he whispered. "Got it in one," Crouch said. "Now tell me, did he accept them back, the ones who renounced him, and did he let you go alive?" "He did accept them," Harry revealed, with some mild groveling and crucio. "But that's rather a moot point, since he died again about 10 minutes later." With that, Harry used a burst of wandless magic to dispel the ropes binding him and lash out at the surprised Death Eater with a hex from each hand. Crouch shielded from the hexes with a wave of his wand, and the second duel of Harry's evening was on. Retrieving his wand, Harry decided, would be far too much of a time-waster and a distraction during such a high-speed fight. He would manage with wandless magic only. He reached out to grasp at Crouch's robes with his magic and yanked him to the right. Crouch managed to right himself, but not in time to avoid a barrage of stunning spells that Harry had launched directly into his path. An additional pair of stunners ensured that Crouch was down, and down for good. Suddenly, he heard clapping behind him. Summoning his wand, Harry spun around to face yet another opponent, only to see the distinctively bright robes of Albus Dumbledore. Harry let himself relax, but only marginally. If Alastor Moody could be an impostor Death Eater, so could Dumbledore himself. "Very well done, Harry," he said, "and quite the skill in wandless magic for someone of age, being able to take down an armed Death Eater without your wand." "How do I know that you're really Albus Dumbledore?" Harry asked. "Because Harry tilted his head in the direction of the downed younger Crouch, "was definitely not Madai Moody." "He's definitely Dumbledore, mate," Ron assured him as he came up behind the headmaster. Hermione, Neville, and Luna were following close behind. Nobody else could be that powerful except, well, you know. Harry reached out with his magical senses to feel out the person in front of him, and he had to acknowledge his best friend's point. The only other people Harry had met who were this magically strong were his friends and Voldemort himself, and Voldemort was dead. He let his wand relax further. "I'd be quite interested to know where you learned such skills, my boy," Dumbledore said. Harry wondered why he was here in the first place, maybe because he had noted something suspicious in Harry's retelling of his disappearance, and had decided to follow him to question him further, or perhaps for yet another reason. It didn't matter, really. One of his secrets had been revealed to the world, the web of hidden truths woven through time beginning to unravel. Harry exchanged glances with his friends. What would they choose to do? He saw the same determination in all of their faces, a determination to speak, and so he made his choice. "I'd love to tell you, sir," Harry agreed with the elder wizard. But it's a long story, and one that should be told once. Tomorrow morning in your office, perhaps, and it involves all of my friends, so our families should be there. Dumbledore seemed satisfied by that, and bid them good night for the time, allowing Harry and his friends to return to their dormitories in peace. "Are we really sure we want to tell the story?" Harry asked. "Yes," said Neville emphatically. "Finally, we can speak of our lives to more than just a few people. I love you guys, but I love my Gran, too, and I want to share what I've been through with her." Ron and Hermione echoed their agreement, and Harry realized they were right. Even if he had grown up always alone, he had Sirius and Remus now, and they were here to stay. They deserved to know the truth, to know what Harry had done for the past 2 decades of his life. "Besides," Hermione said, "we have 16 years of stories to tell, stories that only we remember. Stories of timelines, of struggles and triumphs, of lives and deaths that, if we don't speak of them, will fade into utter nothingness. Because people die, but stories live on forever." All of his friends went to bed, but Harry had one more thing to do. He pulled out the resurrection stone from where he hid it in his trunk and spun it in his hand 3 times. "Lily Potter," he whispered, and a familiar red-haired woman appeared in front of him for the final time. "I love you so much, my son," she said to him softly and sweetly. "I'll be watching over you forever, but it's time for us to let go now." Harry nodded mutely in agreement. He'd known this was coming for months, and still he wasn't fully prepared. "It's time for you to spend your life free of dark magic and time magic and secrets. To love Sirius and Remus, to love Luna, to have children and grandchildren of your own. To look toward the future instead of always looking back at the past. I love you, Mum. I love you so much, and thank you for everything you've done for me, for everything you've given me." Mother and son, dead witch and living wizarding, simply basked in each other's presence for a while before Harry, with a heavy heart, knew it had to end. "Goodbye, Mum. Goodbye, my Harry. I'll see you again one day," he said, his voice filled with longing. "You will," his mum agreed, "but not for a long time." Harry pulled out his firebolt and opened up his dorm window, flying out into the quiet Scottish night. Beside him, a red-haired shade flew silently, accompanying him on this most solemn quest. As he flew, he could almost see visions of the future, though whether they were true visions or just hopes, he did not know. He saw himself sitting between Sirius and Remus in Dumbledore's office. Luna with her father Xenophilius, Neville with his grandmother, Hermione with the Grangers, Ron with all of the Weasleys. They all demonstrated their wandless magic, and under a truth-verifying spell from Dumbledore, told them their tales. They became close to families they had drifted away from over years of secrecy, and they became whole at last. He saw himself watch his beloved Luna walk down the aisle toward him, Ron standing as his best man and Hermione as her maid of honor, Neville among his groomsmen looking lovingly at his Hannah. He saw himself see his first child, a blond boy with green eyes, off to Hogwarts, younger siblings crowding around him to wish him well. The black lake glittered in the starlight beneath him. Shivering slightly in the brisk late-night air, Harry gave one last, longing look at his mother, and with a heavy heart loosened his fingers, deathly tight grip. He let the hallow in his hands fall away, being taken by gravity to its ultimate destination as it splashed into the water below him. As the stone vanished into the depths of the lake, so too did the apparition of his mother, but Harry knew he would see her again. When the time came for him to at last pass from the world, surrounded by his children and his grandchildren, having lived a long life full of joy and meaning. When he, who had 4 times faced death before, would share the fate of the third brother of legend and greet death as an old and long-lost friend.